cheers all the way up now, this final 1,000 meters to the summit of the Col de la Ramez. And it's not all over today when he's over the top, and he knows that. He has another third category climb before he will finally turn onto the valley approach to the town of Morzine in the Alps. 55 seconds is the lead, only back to the next man, and it should be still, I suppose, Aldag.
Still Rolf Aldag, and a lot of people wondering why Armstrong didn't want to go out and lay the law down on the first day in the mountains, as he so often has done in the past. Well, I reckon it's probably because of the fact that this big climb we're going over right now, the Col de la Ramaz, is actually at 22 kilometers to the finish. Now, he could have attacked on this climb and put time between himself and his rivals, but with 22 kilometers downhill to the finish, they would have a huge chance of recovering and pulling them back, and he would therefore have wasted his effort. The big attack on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez, though, is there's no chance to recuperate. There's no chance to come back by taking risks on the descent. Richard Veron now is not very far from the summit of this climb. He still conserves around about 4 minutes of his advantage, but he's hurting right now.
And I'm not surprised. He's trying desperately. He's not thinking now of just winning the King of the Mountains. He's won that title 5 times before. He is thinking of winning this stage and taking the yellow jersey. And to a Frenchman in the 100th year of the Tour de France, that will make him a superstar. And they didn't deserve such success because they had a French leader earlier in the week. He was the first French leader for 2 years, Jean-Patrick Nazon. But this man is now preparing for a descent, and then he'll look towards the finish. He's over the top of the first big climb of this year's Tour. He takes maximum points. Huge round of applause down here in Morzine for him. They're going to cheer him all the way now.
Well, one thing's for certain, whatever happens to Richard Veron right now over the next 22 kilometers, he will be the king of the mountains at the end of today's stage. He will take incredible risks on this descent right now and try to conserve as much of his advantage as possible as we look at the main field here, still controlled by the climbers of Lance Armstrong's team. Chechu Rubiera is the man in first position here, doing a great job of work. Manuel Beltran, who they signed only 1 month before the Tour de France, is in second, and still there is their man. That is Roberto Harris. At the back there, wearing 161, by the way, is Stefano Garzelli. He's not made too much noise in the Tour de France this year, but he's still in with the action.
Yeah, so's your Yaks there from Once. I'm beginning to eat my words. I said he would fall away from the leaderboard today. He was up there in 10th place overall, and he's still in this front group, along with his team captain, Joshiba Beloki. Well, guess who these people are supporting here with a polka dot jersey on? They're supporting, of course, Richard Veron. But coming up the climb now, magnificent place here for Aldag. Now, once the climb is over, Ralph Aldag will come into his own again.
Well, he's a great bike handler. We've seen him win sprints. We've seen him ride well in the mountains at the Tour de France over the years, but he certainly can go downhill very fast. He'll have a tall order, though, to try and bridge a 1 minute gap to Richard Veron, because Veron, for a climber, is an excellent descender as well, and he will be going around those corners as if there is absolutely no tomorrow. He starts the climb, the descent I should say, with an advantage of 4 minutes over the main field, and I don't think he will lose very much of that on the descent. There's Moreau moving up onto the shoulder of Lance Armstrong. These men are all moving up in the overall classification. It will be a completely different classification tonight.
Well, this very select forward group is closing in quickly on Aldag, I think. He's gone over the top with a lead of 1:32. David Miller, just hang on, David, because it's nearly all over. Just rocking a little bit at the back, and our picture there, David Miller. But if he gets over the top, and it's not too far now, he'll be okay. This is the pacemaking, and it's an interminable pace now by the riders on the Spanish membership of US Postal team. This is Rubiera, who's setting the pace at the front as the right-hand man of Lance here in the mountains. Rubiera himself saying they'd have 2 or 3 men up alongside Lance on the climbs today. Well, he's proved to be absolutely correct. And the yellow jersey, Pena, has gone, but Armstrong is still here.
But look at this tactic of US Postal. They're using these 2 climbers here, Rubiera and Beltran. They seem to be keeping in reserve Roberto Harris for something special later on. There is the jersey I think they confused Eric Zabel with there, because that's the jersey of the national champion of Austria. That's Georg Tochnik. And I have a funny feeling that, in fact, that jersey there is the jersey of the man who was well up in the overall classification of the Giro d'Italia earlier this season.
I think you're right, Paul, and he's still in that group, and that's a much more likely candidate because Georg Tochnik is a very, very good climber. Still counting down, remember, we've got the leader over the top, Veron. Ralph Aldag is at 1:32. It looks as though the peloton could still be running around at 4 minutes. 3:20 is the third rider over the top. It looks like Plove again, who's gone over the top. He's done well to survive, but he's gone over the top in third place. Tyler Hamilton is in that group.
Still surviving. It's amazing to think what this man has gone through. There you can see the pink jersey, Yoshiba Beloki. Ulrich still looking very calm and collected. An acceleration coming here from ibanesto.com, but they won't react at all. Armstrong just stretching his neck there, the pain of sitting in that position for 4.5 hours in the saddle, and they're not too far behind. There's Iban Mayo, and the move now has come from ibanesto.com for the descent.
I think that was actually Mancebo, the team leader there of Ibanesto, who just made a point coming out of the top. Now, the skill of the descenders now, as they start the descent, and you know, just under 4 minutes now for Armstrong's group. They've got to pull back 2 minutes at least to stop Richard Veron taking the leader's yellow jersey.
This is a big escapade here by Richard Veron, who is now slowly but surely starting to increase his advantage over the main field. This is the final climb of the day into the small town of Léger. When he crosses the summit of this climb, he'll have an 8.5 kilometer downhill charge to the finish, a place where he has won in the past. He's won on the same road here in Morzine, but right now this could be a very sweet victory, because for the man who has been regarded as the bad boy of cycling, he has come back to the top end of the sport, and he could well today not only be garnering himself the lead in the King of the Mountains competition, but he may well be taking the yellow jersey away from the US Postal Service team. And after a long breakaway of almost 190 kilometers, quite remarkable. The guys on the front end of the group here, Phil, this is US Postal Service. They've shut down the pacemaking. They're not worried at all, I don't think, about Veron, because Armstrong knows that tomorrow he will have to pay the debt of this long breakaway today. There on the far side in the white jersey, you can see Ivan Basso. Two riders in this group from Euskaltel-Euskadi are David Echevarria and Iban Mayo. Iban Mayo won here just 1 month ago when the Dauphiné Libéré came along this exact same road.
Yes, the Postal boys are quite happy, I'm sure of that. They're looking at each other, they're just coordinating themselves. The gap is still just inside 4 minutes at the moment. It's gone out very slightly, but Richard Veron could clearly now, excuse me, a desperate man here, but trying to hang on just for a few more kilometers. A little more than 10 miles to the finish for him as he races now towards the very nice town of Léger, and that'll start his downhill approach to the finish. This should be the 15-kilometer to go banner. Every motorcycle down there wants one picture. There's 10 kilometers to go. That's a bigger relief indeed for Richard Veron. That gives him just a 6-mile run now. Well, he's won the day, Paul. All that remains is to see whether the time gain will give him yellow.
He'll keep the yellow, he'll get the yellow jersey at the end of today. He's only got 1.5 kilometers to go uphill, and then it's a downhill plunge into the streets of Morzine. And even if he does lose some time over the last few kilometers, I don't think he'll lose much more than 1.5 minutes. Another time check coming through. In fact, US Postal have completely switched off the pacemaking there at the front, and this man's advantage has gone up to 4 minutes and 46 seconds. And in fact, the crowd have just heard that as well, because they are going ballistic. They love Richard Veron. He's won himself 6 stages of the Tour de France in the past, and he's absolutely storming down here to victory.
Well, this will be his 6th, actually. I'm just typing it into his record as we sit here, Paul. Nothing else to do now, because he's going to win, isn't he? He's riding superbly quick down here, and he's a man who's always won in a similar style. He's gone out in aggression. I remember when he won in his very first stage in Luzardidon in 1994. He was on his own on that occasion, and then in 95 at Cotteret.
US Postal on the frontier right now, I think playing a tactical game here this afternoon, because they're not too worried about the long-term prospects of Richard Veron, but they don't want to take too much away from him. This is the summit of the climb, and these men here are losing massive amounts of time for the first time in the Tour de France. There's Jens Voigt, Nicolas Jalabert in the red and white jersey there. A little bit further back, it's Vicente Garcia Acosta in this group from ibanesto.com.
Just trying to see if we can pick out anybody of note, but I don't think, looking down here, Paul, we're going to see any big names now. It's a long time since Veron crossed over.
Veron has crossed this line about 20 minutes ago. The back of the group there is Salvatore Commesso, the former Italian national champion. but the way the race is running out right now, Richard Veron is the man leading this bike race. He leads Rolf Aldijk by 1 minute and 30 seconds, and then it's the group of Lance Armstrong 4 minutes and 46 seconds in arrears. Richard Veron now is not too far away from the summit of this final climb of the day, a little climb called Léger. It's a third category climb. He's building himself up a huge margin in the King of the Mountains competition, but at the end of today he will get himself the yellow jersey. He wore the yellow jersey in his first Tour de France, if you remember, when he came to this event as a youngster back in 1992, riding for the RMO team, and since then he's been in love with this event, and once or twice he's crossed over the path trying to make sure that he could win the Tour de France, and in fact even delved into the darker side of the sport on 1 or 2 occasions.
Well, he's dancing his way to victory now. He's got a huge flotilla of vehicles behind him. 5 wins already, number 6 is on the way. He's been a winner in Morzine before. In the year 2000, he was also in solitary fashion then when he rode on the Italian team Polti. But now he's riding for the Belgian team Quickstep. But he is such a popular figure in France. The motorcyclists, they're getting a little bit too close here, but then he is French and they do want to capture the images for the papers tomorrow as he now climbs up round at Léger before he heads down to the finish in Morzine itself.
Well, there's the summit of the third category climb. He'll get some points there, but very shortly what's more important for him, Phil, is he will get the descent down into the finish. The last time check we got back to the group containing Lance Armstrong was 4 minutes and 46 seconds as we look at the gruppetto coming to the summit of the climb. These men are just hoping to survive today. They want to stay inside the time limit, which on a day like today should be around about the 1 hour mark. There's Stuart O'Grady on the far side, Pavel Padrinos also in the group there just at the back, Yatislav Ekimov. They've done their job for the day. They're just conserving energy because tomorrow they will have to come out and play once again to try and get Lance Armstrong into the yellow jersey, because he will not have it at the end of today's stage.
Baden Cook also in there, and Baden Cook, the new wearer of the green jersey of the race lead on points after the retirement early today. There's the yellow jersey of Victor Hugo Peñu as well. He's fallen right back. And so he's done for the day as well. He'll lose that jersey, of course, today. But also Baden Cook will pull on the green. That'll be the first time ever for him. And he'll be only the 3rd Australian to achieve that. But meanwhile, we are racing off towards the finish in Morzine now. This is Léger. As we course through the streets now, Richard Veron is heading to victory. A familiar role for him in Morzine. He won here in 2000. The tempo still being set by US Postal, nobody willing to help them as they gradually go further ahead. 4 minutes 25 now for Richard Veron. He is the new yellow jersey of the Tour de France. And don't forget, the town of Léger is 5 miles or 8 kilometers from the finishing line. And that, by the way, is the venue for the Mountain Bike World Championships next year. Couldn't think of a prettier place to hold it.
Absolutely remarkable backdrop for any kind of sporting event. The town of Léger and also the town of Morzine, which towers above it, is the ski station of Avoriaz. On the descent right now down towards the finish line is Richard Veron. The last time check he had was 4 minutes and 25 seconds, but he is on the descent down into the finishing straight right now, and they are not going to pull back very much more of that 4 minutes 25 seconds he started the ascent with.
Well, this has been a marvellous display by Richard Veron. There's no way you can take this away for the man. It's been superb. This is the principal group with David Moncoutier tagged onto the tail. We'd like to see David Miller in here, but we think he's still dangling just a little bit. Oh, is that Miller on the left up? I think he might be there. Very, very close. We'll have to wait and see as we're looking down on the 33 riders here. This is the 11th Tour de France for Richard Veron. In his very first tour in 1992, he did hold briefly the yellow jersey, and that was the occasion we said, who on earth is this man? We hadn't heard of him, and he's never worn it since until this year.
He's charging down into town right now. He's got a slight right-hand turn as he gets into the outskirts of Morzine. He'll have to ride around on the flat, drop down into the bottom part of the town square, and then drag his body up the last kilometer to the finishing straight, but he should not lose very much time at all. I think, you know, Phil, US Postal Service have made a pretty sensible tactic, because let's not forget, the Tour de France is not being won or lost on this stage this afternoon. It's just being played out. It's a 3-week bike race. It's important to ride well on every individual stage. I think today Richard Veron is shining for the first time, but he will pay for this effort over the next few days.
Well, I think tomorrow will give us the answer to that, Paul, but for today it's going to be Veron, I think.
A last flurry of attacks here coming from the Spanish riders, but I think they've left it just a little bit too late right now. They're thinking about a few points here as they come up to the summit of this final climb of today's stage, the third category climb of Léger. On the far side there is Yoshiba Beloki. But this looks like Francisco Mancebo trying to get himself a few points, and taking over the workload on the front after his teammates have disappeared is Lance Armstrong. He doesn't want anybody at all to slip away from the front end of the main field. Veron is pedaling with every amount of energy he can muster up from his body here right now as he comes inside of 2 kilometers to go. His advantage over Armstrong is 3:58. His advantage at the end of today's stage will be 2.5 minutes in the overall classification. He will have to defend that tomorrow on what is going to be a very difficult stage over the Col du Telegraphe, the Col du Galibier, which climbs up to 2,600 meters in altitude, and of course the big mountain top finish of the Alpe d'Huez. 14 kilometers of climbing all the way to the summit, and a race where in the past Lance Armstrong has laid down the law. Oh, Veron is suffering right now. He's just trying to find a comfortable position in the saddle through this small roundabout at 1.5 kilometers to go. He's looking for the banner indicating the last kilometer of racing. He's dropping now down into the far side of town, and then he will come up the finishing straight, and it's going to be a long, hard finishing straight for him because it's a false flat up the last 700 meters. He looks across, but he knows right now that he's got what he went out to do this morning, the victory of the stage.
1 kilometer to go, and this is going to feel a marvellous moment for Richard Veron. He won in Morzine in 2000. You might hear the public applauding outside of our commentary box. This is a great victory for him. Then the clock will tell us, Paul, if he's got yellow.
Well, he's got yellow, Phil. There's no problem at all about that, because at 5 kilometers to go, the group containing Lance Armstrong and all of the other favourites in the Tour de France were still 4 minutes behind. He's gone round those corners in an absolutely ballistic manner. He's inside the area now where he can see the meters ticking by. He's been up this finishing straight before, and he's just going to give it everything, but he will enjoy this victory. He won't salute until the final minute because he knows he needs every second possible.
The crowd are cheering along the barriers all the way. The moment every Frenchman dreams of, very few have it. He'll be only the 82nd Frenchman ever to pull on the Mayo jaune. As he races up towards the line now, he looks at the crowd. He gives them a smile, he gives them a grit of his teeth. He's still looking for that banner. When is it going to come? This is rather a nasty little hill up to the line, the way they come in these days. It wasn't the way he came in when he won in the year 2000. Now's the moment. Almost exactly the same salute he gave when he arrived here in 2000. Richard Veron takes stage 7 of the Tour de France. The clock starts now, and he is looking for yellow.
This is Sylvain Chavanel. He's just jumped away from the group of Lance Armstrong, trying to get himself a little bit of last-minute glory, but in the main field behind, they're not too worried about Sylvain Chavanel. They've lost themselves an awful lot of time on a certain Frenchman by the name of Richard Veron. Still in the middle of nowhere. Let's not forget the man who's going to cross the line in second place is Rolf Aldeg. He's about 2.5 minutes behind, but it's an emotional finish here for this man, Richard Veron. He's come back to the top of the sport. He's put in an unbelievable escapade today. He's garnered everything he wanted to get, but most importantly, he's got himself the yellow jersey.
Here, for me, has been one of the heroes of the day. If ever you're a cyclist at this level, you suffer like Aldeg has suffered, you are left behind, you go back to the man, you are left behind again, you hang on. This has got to be his finest ride in the Tour de France.
This man is a true professional right now. He'd hoped to try and stay in contact with Richard Veron. He loses 2.5 minutes after 6 hours in the saddle, but this is one of the stages he can write home about. I think Benoit Poivel, the man from Crédit Agricole, Phil, has been brought back into the fold, and third man out on the road is Sylvain Chavanel of Brioche-la-Boulangère. The main field are not too far behind, only about 30 seconds.
Well, this will be a celebration in memory of Fabrice Salençon, their teammate, who died of a heart attack just before the start of the Tour of Germany. For that reason, the team pulled out of competition. They've come back in for the Tour de France. And now they will remember him, because this rider here was thought to be the star of the future, along with Salençon, who died of a heart attack and had many post-mortems, and it was death by natural causes. A great tragedy, and I'm sure that Sylvain Chavanel will be thinking of that as he comes up the home straight here. He's going to take third place. He's got away from the big bunch. Nobody's chased him down. He looks over his shoulder. He's learning to be a good professional, making sure nobody is coming back. Look at the time gap, Paul. It is still quite big here.
Time gap is huge. It's still around about 3 minutes and 50 seconds back to the main field, so there is a new leader of the bike race this afternoon. As Chavanel gets the cheers of the French crowd, the main field cannot be very far back. 3:50, that's the time since Richard Veron crossed the line right now, so he's the new leader of the bike race, he's the new king of the mountains, and of course the winner of the stage. This is Rogers.
Well, is this Michael Rogers from Australia? That is the ride of your life, the first man ever in the Tour de France, and that's a superb result for Rogers as he crosses the line there. Then comes the rest of the group as they're led in there. Stefano Garzelli, very, very close indeed, but Michael Rogers done an incredible ride there for Australia. And the gap has counted out on 4 minutes plus there. Now, yes, maybe Armstrong did allow it to go, and maybe Richard Virenque is tired, but a 4-minute gap is big, and it's going to take some pulling back.
Yep, 4:06 on the stage between Virenque and the chasing group, with Rolf Aldag, Sylvain Chavanel and Michael Rogers spanning the gap. David Miller right up there too in 8th place. In the same group as David were most, but certainly not all, of the big names. Lance Armstrong was 15th, Jan Ullrich 21st, and Joseba Beloki 32nd, all on the same time. As David Miller came in, Ned Boulting was waiting for him.
Well done, David. You stuck with the pace. How did you feel?
Oh, terrible. I blew up at the top of the climb, seeing stars. Fortunately, I had some food in my pockets, otherwise I'd have been dead. But yeah, I was feeling good apart from that. I just blew completely at the top. So anyway.
Nonetheless, to do what you've done on a day in this heat, you must be reasonably happy with your day's work.
Yeah, no, it's good. I'm happy.
Okay, that's good.
Considering how I was feeling at the end.
Well, however he was feeling, it can't have been as bad as Santiago Botero, touted as a challenger to Armstrong, but sadly for him, his customary bad day in the mountains coming on the first day in the mountains. He came in at 10:21 behind the winning time, and his Tour challenge is over. The Autobus, the big group that gathers at the back, came through almost 25 minutes down, and somewhere in there was the yellow jersey of Victor Hugo Peña. Of course, there were riders today who didn't make it in at all. 7 men abandoned today, the highest profile of them being the green jersey of Alessandro Patacchi. 5 others, including Jan Kursepu, climbed off of their own accord. Jesus Manzano had no choice. He collapsed with sunstroke, but thankfully he's now okay. Well, we said he was desperate to make his mark on the Centenary Tour, and he has. The most popular rider in France, except for an office complex in the Paris suburbs where the Tour organisation is based. Richard Virenque takes the stage, the King of the Mountains jersey, and the yellow jersey as race leader. There's the confirmation. Armstrong remains second, but by 2 minutes 37, as opposed to the single second he trailed by this morning. Jan Ullrich lost no time on Armstrong today. He's 9th, and David Miller moves up to 23rd. But the big losers are Santiago Botero, who's now 68th, Giro winner Gilberto Simoni, 74th, and this morning's yellow jersey Victor Hugo Peña, now 103rd. Matt Rendell spoke to the man who took it off him.
Il faut oser dans la vie, et j'ai osé aujourd'hui. C'était un peu risqué parce que je partais de loin et j'avais peur que ça rentre, mais avec Paolo Bettini, il m'a attendu, et après l'échappée a continué longtemps, et les 5 derniers kilomètres, je savais que c'était gagné, c'était magique.
Well, he must have had an inkling a bit earlier than 5 kilometres, because he'd shipped the family in today to the VIP area. Perhaps he'd had a premonition. The celebration was certainly well rehearsed, a carbon copy of the one he used here 3 years ago, the last time the Tour finished in Morzine. The Tour first climbed Alpe d'Huez in 1952, and it was such a success the race organisers made an immediate note to return 24 years later. By then, the mountain was in colour, and so were the fans, orange mainly, as the Dutch, perhaps unused to the concept of mountains, rode up it as though it were just a different kind of flat.
Steven Rooks now, 6 hours and 55 minutes and 44 seconds his time. He's home and dry.
Since then, it's been the setting for a series of epic rides by the best climbers in the world. The last man to win here was Lance Armstrong in 2001. For most riders, though, Alpe d'Huez is 45 minutes of pain measured out in 21 hairpin bends. It separates the hard men from the rest, and a lot of riders from their will to go on. As the legend has grown, so have the crowds, filling the road in front of the cyclists until the last possible second, and occasionally beyond.
Well, Guarini has only one... that is disgraceful. Right in the way of going. A spectator got in the way. Well, I can't believe that. I've never seen that happen before here at Alpe d'Huez.
51 years on from the Tour's first visit, Alpe d'Huez has become more than just a stage of the world's biggest bike race. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Alpstock. Good evening. An estimated 400,000 people and no admission fee. Alpe d'Huez confirmed its status as the most spectacular open-air sports stadium in the world today for the Tour's centenary visit. Now, after day one in the mountains, everyone had expected that defending champion Lance Armstrong would take control of the race and the leader's yellow jersey. Instead, and somehow appropriately in the Tour's centenary year, it was the man who embodied the worst as well as the best of the world's greatest bike race.
Richard Veron, after a lone escape, salutes the French public, and with this victory, and I bet he never expected it, it will give him also the overall lead of the race.
With that solo win in Morzine yesterday, the most controversial career in cycling came full circle. A second yellow jersey for Richard Veron, 11 years after his first as a Tour rookie in 1992. In between, he established himself as the most popular rider in France, if not necessarily the Peloton, with 4 consecutive King of the Mountains victories. Then, in 1998, it all went horribly, publicly wrong. As the leader of the Festina team at the centre of the Tour's doping scandal that year, Veron left in an ugly mixture of tears and disgrace. He finally admitted to taking performance-enhancing drugs and was banned from the following year's race. But cycling's governing body overruled the Tour. Veron arrived in a blaze of bad publicity. When he celebrated his return by winning the King of the Mountains title for a 5th time, you could almost hear the Tour hierarchy gritting their teeth. His well-documented wrongdoing, though, didn't seem to affect his popularity with the public. In the following year, thoroughly drug-tested like the rest of the riders, he confirmed his comeback with a superb stage win like yesterday in Morzine. Coming into this Tour, he said he was determined to leave his mark on the race's centenary, and now he has. And there is the incontrovertible evidence. Richard Veron leading the Tour by 2 minutes 37 from the defending champion Lance Armstrong, with Beloki a little over 3 minutes behind in 7th. Jan Ullrich started the day 9.3.15 back, with Tyler Hamilton 20th, and David Miller, who stayed with the leaders all the way up the climbs yesterday, 23rd. Now, today's stage featured 3 of the great climbs in Tour history. The Col du Telegraphe, the Col du Galibier, the highest point in this year's race at 2,645 metres, and then the final 14-kilometre climb through the heat, the fatigue and the fans up to Alpe d'Huez. Well, as you might imagine, Richard Veron was very active early on, going over first on a couple of the early summits, because as well as the yellow jersey, of course, he holds the polka dot jersey for the King of the Mountains competition. Well, after the climb of the Col du Telegraphe, US Postal started to crack the whip at the front of the group, and as we go to Phil and Paul in the commentary box, the race is now on the Col du Galibier.
Thanks, Gary. Well, this is certainly becoming the Sunshine Tour, you know, because we haven't seen any rain since the race began. Paul, the mountains again today, and it is very, very hot.
Very hot racing conditions for the riders on the roads of the Tour de France this afternoon. Ullrich and, of course, Lance Armstrong will enjoy it. 35 degrees Celsius in the valleys. At the top of some of the mountains, though, it could drop to 15 degrees Celsius. There's hardly any wind either in the valley roads. And looking up at the skies, I think I have to agree with the weather forecast. No clouds at all.
You know, certain riders like the heat, like Lance Armstrong and Jan Ullrich. So let's see how they're getting on. They're on the climbs now. As we're now seeing the peloton keeping their tempo. Lance is tucked in, being nursed along by his big teammates here. They're confident that when it comes to an attack from the rival team leaders, he'll be able to do it and go with any moves. George Hincapie here, not dreaming of first place in Paris. His job is simply a pacemaker, to keep this tempo as high as he can for as long as he can, and then drop off. Yesterday he came in quite a way down after Richard Veron and Lance Armstrong have finished, but he'd done his job well. He'd made the pace early on the Ramaz climb. Well, there's Father Christmas, but unfortunately the snow makes him look rather ridiculous still on top of that caravan.
He does, but Father Christmas, I think, gave Lance a very nice present yesterday, because I think he and his team had a fairly easy day in the saddle. They weren't too worried about Richard Veron. Yes, he took the yellow jersey, he took the lead in the King of the Mountains competition, but Armstrong's cage was never rattled. He rode a perfect stage and a perfect course. He used his teammates to perfection, and yes, George Hincapie did finish a long way back on the stage once he'd done his job of work. All of the men from US Postal Service, who are no longer in the front group with Lance Armstrong, actually cruised in 10, 15 and 20 minutes behind their leader, because they know they have to come out and play again every day for the next 2 weeks. Armstrong, at the end of the day, when he looked at the classification, Phil, I think would have been very satisfied.
You know, there are 40 riders in this group at the moment. That is an awful lot of riders at this stage on the giant Col de Galibier, but it's also an indicator that the big riders, the men who are expecting to win this Tour de France, have not yet turned their wheels in anger. And yet there are still riders in trouble at the back. I think this is probably still Patrice Algon, just grabbing a drink off the Spectator, not to drink, because that's something the riders will never do. They don't know where it's been, but they will pour it over their heads.
It's a dodgy thing to do as we go a little further back, around 30 seconds off the group of Lance Armstrong, the champion of the Tour of Italy. He is having a very difficult day. He's not enjoying these climbs right now, but he will not give up, and I know this man goes downhill very rapidly indeed, and if he crosses the summit about 40 seconds behind the Armstrong group, he should reintegrate the group of the yellow jersey of Richard Veron and Armstrong on the descent before we go through the very nasty little town called The Grave, and I always get a shiver when I see that place.
Yes, indeed. Now, you know, this man here must be wondering what on earth has happened to the magical body he had just 4 weeks ago when he won the Tour of Italy, where he conquered the high mountains, because the rider in front of him, Jörg Ludwig, is a German rider who rides on this Italian team. He speaks fluent English as well, by the way. He was the last selection for the Seiko team to ride the Tour de France, and here he is, better than his team leader, trying desperately now to drag him up the mountain so he can chase him back into the group on the descent. And still the relentless pace there as we're beginning to shed off George Hincapie now. He was the man that set the pace. I was telling you, once he's done his job, it's his job then to simply get into the finish. There's something I can never understand or appreciate, Paul, that these riders who give 110% of their energy then arrive at the foot of Alpe d'Huez and have to get home and beat the time in it when they've got nothing left.
That's the tough thing about being in a professional sport like this, but you get into a zone where you just ride at a pace which is not quite as painful as it would be if you were trying to stay at the front end of the bike race, but you still have to hurt to make sure you get inside the time limit, which on a day like today, which is going to be a very long stage, it'll be around about 6 hours in the saddle by the time the riders get themselves here. They will have 50 minutes to finish, so starting with Lance Armstrong at the bottom of the Alpe d'Huez is actually quite a bonus for his teammates.
Well, it looks like Laurent Dufaux has also moved up onto the left of our picture there at the front of the bunch, for twice finishing fourth in the Tour de France. Very good Swiss climber. We're just seeing losing contact here, one of the team Bianchi riders, and it looks like Aitor Garmendia. He's also a good climber, but the man who's never ever appeared in distress, and he's a great poker player when it comes to showing nothing on his face, is Jan Ullrich. Big, huge question mark on this man, because he's coming back from 2 years in the doldrums. He got himself overweight, he looked bad, he couldn't find his form, he was prosecuted for drunken driving, he was prosecuted for using a social drug, ecstasy. The whole world was against him. He straightened himself out, and I think he's going to be a big factor.
It's going to be scary, Phil, in the last week. I tell you, he looks meaner and leaner than I've ever seen him in the last few years. And his team, I think, will rise to the occasion. That was Aitor Garmendia, a man that he will count on an awful lot when we go further down the road. As we look a bit further back, that was Evgeny Petrov, who seems to be getting dropped. But we're in the final kilometre, and a lot of these riders dropped at this point of the race will have a very good chance to reintegrate the group on the descent. I'm a bit surprised to see the two orange jerseys here of the Euskaltel-Euskadi team, because they are men who always revel in the mountains. And on the front, Stefano Garzelli. That is remarkable. Richard Virenque is moving up there in the yellow jersey a little further back, but Garzelli is certainly riding better. And let's not forget, he came into the Giro d'Italia. Oh, there's a move there. This is Mancebo.
The quiet man of the world, Garzelli. We keep on forgetting about him. He's won the Tour of Italy in the past. He finished second this year. He's not suffering like Simone. In fact, he's going to kick again here. They've blown away the King of the Mountains leader, the yellow jersey, Veron. And Garzelli gets the top first. Mancebo second. The yellow jersey there only goes over in about 4th or 5th place. Well, that is it. Moreau has gone over the top as well. There was a lot of riders sitting behind US Postal there, Paul, who were hiding a lot of energy. I still wonder about Lance Armstrong at the moment.
Just saving their energies, just waiting to see if there are any chinks in the armour. And I could see the teammates there of Armstrong at the back end of that group. But that was a serious attack there coming from Stefano Garzelli. It just goes to show Garzelli's different form to that of Gilberto Simoni. Simoni rode the whole season and rode to peak form during the month of May when he won the Giro d'Italia. But Stefano Garzelli rode into form during the Giro d'Italy, and now he's in great form, I would have to say, Phil, when he comes to the final week of the Tour de France. This is Simoni. He's lost himself about a minute at the summit, and I have a feeling as we look further back, these are the boys who've done big work for Armstrong. Floyd Landis from San Diego, he'll go over the summit here with the two chasing Saeco riders, and with a bit of a luck and a rapid descent, they should reintegrate the group on the descent.
I mean, it's not too much to lose. That's been very, very good piece of riding. And George Hincapie too, I think, will rejoin there. And look at the sprint again now. Garzelli coming with a terrific kick. Man who's had 16 wins in his career. He's 30 years of age now, Stefano Garzelli. But he clearly has not been tired out by the Tour of Italy. He was almost going so fast over the top, he nearly didn't get round the corner there.
He nearly didn't get round the corner, but it's great to see him coming back. He's a huge battler as well, a man who had a fracas with the rules and regulations because he was brought into doubt when he was leading the Tour of Italy last year, finding himself positive for an outdated drug called probenecid. 12 months out of the sport and second in the Tour of Italy. Not a bad comeback. Rapid descent here right now. We're looking at these riders are not in fact insisting with their acceleration here, Phil, because they're cruising off the slopes of the Galibier at around about 65-70 kilometers an hour. This is Aitor Garmendia at the back in the lime green jersey, light blue jersey of Team Bianchi. Just in front of him, it was David Moncoutier of Team Cofidis, and he'll be replacing David Miller as the leader of that squad because the British rider Miller is having a very hard time out on the roads. And it looks as if towards the summit, Michael Rogers, in fact, has popped off the group here. He did a lot of work in the early part of the climb for Richard Virenque, but I think maybe the final few kilometers of the Col du Galibier were just a little bit too much for the young rider. Let's not forget, Phil, he's only 23 years of age, and it's his first attempt at the Tour.
Rogers goes over the summit, 2:47 in arrears. Now he's going to have a drink, and he might try and catch a newspaper there to go under his jersey for the cool December. It's not that cold today. He'll descend sensibly, I hope, as he goes down what is a fairly long descent here. 2.5 minutes. It's difficult to bridge that on the descent. It depends how much risk he wants to take as we go back down now towards the valley. But he should feel okay with that ride.
He should feel okay with that ride. I mean, after all, Phil, it's the first time he's really had to drag his body over these huge mountain passes. But if at the front of the race they don't battle it out, he's got a very good chance of coming back, because in fact we go downhill now for around about 40 kilometers. So if he's feeling good and he's with a reasonable group, they do have a chance of pulling themselves back. On the front of the main field, it's still Lance's team doing all the pacemaking. I'm very surprised that we haven't seen an attack come from Once, because the team of Yoshiba Beloki are heavily represented in this group. They've been sitting there in the shadows for the moment, waiting for the moment to pounce, and it may well be that they expect the moment to pounce is going to be on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez, which comes right at the very end of the stage. 13.8 kilometers of climbing, having ridden for 219 kilometers, or basically in old money, as you would say it, 137 miles on today's race.
Now, the bit that I would like in the Tour de France, the freewheeling section. But, you know, this is another type of skill the professional cyclists have to practice and become experts at. Because if you are detached from the leading group, you've got to take risks, and you must take your right line into these corners, because you will scrape speeds of 100 kilometers an hour to chase back into these groups.
Well, not every bike rider as a professional is very good at going downhill, and in the past many occasions I've seen Jan Ullrich put into difficulty on the downhill sections of the course. It's all a question of where the center of gravity is on the body and in the position that you get on your machine. And Ullrich is a huge bike rider, very much over 6 foot in height, and when he tries to get down into the corners, his body weight seems to get badly distributed. This is a move here, looks like Georg Tocznik, the champion of Austria, the man who was well up in the overall classification. This is Garmendia reintegrating. And rather surprising, Phil, when you look at the mountains we've been over so far this afternoon, this is still a very big group of riders.
Just coming on here, Paul, Lyseca, Echeverria, David Moncoutier, they've already contacted. Now we're going up here back with the two chasers from the Seiko boys here. Now it'd be interesting to watch these guys as they go downhill. They've got to bridge a gap of a minute. Oh, we're not going to watch them. We've gone back to the top of the Galibier here at the moment, as the rider's still coming on the top. It's over 5 minutes now, and this is Sandy Cazard.
Had a hard time. He was looking to ride high in the overall classification here at the Tour de France, but obviously the hard tempo put in by Lance Armstrong is going to make a serious clarification at the top of the overall standings this evening. And these men have lost themselves already almost 6 minutes, and we are still a long way to go to the finish. Phil, we are 62 kilometers from the finish line. That's 40 miles.
Yes, and remember that behind those, although we say he's lost 5 or 6 minutes, there are 100 riders still behind those riders coming up the mountain. Back up to the lead peloton. Lyseca sat at the back here. There's the result of the climb. Christophe Moreau got third. The yellow jersey leader, Richard Veron, was in fact fourth, but he hangs on to his lead in the King of the Mountains. Little drink there for Thomas Lisa as he comes up on the Gerolsteiner team. Lost his mate Michael Risch yesterday, who gave up. Said he had an injured right knee.
He certainly had an allergy, I think, to the mountains coming up.
That's
as well.
for sure.
Udo Bolt is in this group. He's possibly riding the Tour de France for his last time. In that group as well, Koos Moerenhout, the teammate of Robbie McEwen, who must be a long way behind, Phil, because the Aussie...
But Robbie's a clever boy.
He's a clever boy, but
he
I
won't
tell you
get
what,
eliminated. He'll find a nice big group, and he might well treat us to a wheelie over the line like he so often does.
I hope so. I hope so. He should have a good chance of getting inside the time limit today, because on a stage like today, a long day like this, the elimination time should be around about 50 minutes.
But you know, Armstrong has so often unleashed his anger as soon as the mountains begin. He's won the Tour de France for the past 4 years. That's why we talk about him so much. Here is a rider who's done nothing yet except hurt the riders with some soft tempo riding. But the big leaders, they are still as comfortable as Armstrong.
But Armstrong has used that tactic every year for the last 4 years, and everybody's expected it this year. He's maybe got something else special tucked into his bag, because he would have expected all of the riders to look for his wheel for the first big attack in the mountains, and maybe he's thinking about domination, as Bernard Hinault said this morning, in the big individual time trial to come. And of course, once we go down into the Pyrenean mountains towards the end of the Tour. We're still 2 weeks to go from the finish. You've got to ride a sensible race. As we look at this backdrop, Phil, you cannot create a stadium anywhere in the world quite as magnificent as that.
No, you can't. This is Gilberto Simone here. They're going to get back quite easily, because the peloton, the lead group there, are bunched together, so they're coolly freewheeling down. They're not worried about life behind. It's a good sign for Michael Rogers too. He might well bridge that gap of over 2 minutes.
Well, somebody seems to have wanted to pick up the pacemaking
I'm wondering
slightly.
if it's Georges Tocznik. It looks like it's a white jersey there.
It looked like a white jersey. It needs to have 2 red bands on it if it is going to be Georg Tocznik.
And it sounds as though Hincapie and Landis might be coming back.
Oh. This is one of the AG2R riders going out on the attack now. This is rather a clever move here, because in fact this is Mikel Astroloza, the winner earlier this year.
It is Astroloza.
Of the Flèche Wallonne.
Yes, also did rather well when he won the Jacobs Creek Tour down under in Australia, and he's been such an improved bike rider this year.
Good move by him, and that's going to make it a bit more difficult for Michael Rogers to get back onto the front end of the race here, because he's going to have to go down very rapid indeed.
I don't think they'll chase him yet. Here comes primarily Simone, being escorted by his faithful German-speaking teammate, Jörg Ludwig. There's the peloton. So you see, they are coming back, and he'll live to fight on Alpe d'Huez now. No panic here. It's a long, long way down, as Paul Sherman has said, 25 miles or 40 kilometers back into the valley. and then you'll see some crowds, I can promise you, as we head to Bordeaux and all the way up the climb of Alpe d'Huez. It's going to be a fine grandstand finish. It's only a question of seeing who will win the climb. But whoever does, Paul, will receive the award today from Lucho Herrera of Colombia, the man who conquered this climb in 1984.
Magical climber, a brilliant climber, one of the most incredible climbers we've ever seen at the Tour de France. And I tell you, I was actually in the same hotel as Lucho Herrera in that Tour de France, Phil, in 1984, and it was absolutely wild outside. We couldn't. We were absolutely surrounded by Colombians, and they were singing until 2 o'clock in the morning. And that was the tough thing about the Colombians when they first came here, because they were completely out of their time zone, and they were getting telephone calls at 2 o'clock in the morning to do radio interviews, and they said, fine, no problem, no problem. But later on, they had to change and become much more serious and adopt the European style of racing.
Yes, indeed. They were good at going up hills, but they weren't the best at bike handlers, were they?
Didier Rousse now, the French national champion, he's seen the possibility of a move here. He realizes we've only done about 8 kilometers of the descent off the summit of the Col du Galibier, and we are looking at a descent of around about 30 kilometers. A couple more of Armstrong's teammates here. These men did a lot of work early on. Victor Hugo Peña on the right-hand side there, the man who led the Tour de France for many days alongside Pavel Padronos. They've lost 10 minutes. They're not too worried about that. They're thinking about conserving energy right now, and everybody's recognized this man, Phil. They hear the crowds cheering him on. The first Colombian ever to wear the yellow jersey at the Tour, despite all the great performance of Colombians in the past, like Lucho Herrera, Santiago Botero, and of course Fabio Parra.
And he did it on his 29th birthday. Took a personal phone call from the president of Colombia after he'd done it as well. It was all a magical moment. We're looking here at riders coming up now, as you see the clock ticking away. We'll try and pick 1 or 2 of them out for you, but there's a lot of riders here now just wanting to get to the finish. They have to fight the time limit, because the time limit is not known until they have the time for the day delivered by the winning rider. Then they eliminate you after a certain percentage, which is based on the average speed for the day. So you've got to be careful.
Well, I'm a bit surprised that Astroloza here trying to bring on board drinks when he's trying to get himself away off the front end of the main field. He's been joined here by Didier Rousse. Now, this is a very good move. Rousse is a courageous bike rider. He's been the national champion before. He's been a stage winner in the Tour de France. And thank you very much. We've got a moving bar here at the Tour de France. You know, when the riders want to, they can call up this motorbike which carries fresh water for everybody in the bike race, and they can take on board as many drinks as they like during a certain part of the race, once 50 kilometers has been covered and up until 20 kilometers to the end. In theory and legally, they're not supposed to take drinks on the slopes of the climb once a mountain ascent has started.
Well, now there are 2. This is a very interesting little breakaway. Didier Rousse is a good climber and won his French title just 2 weeks ago, today in fact, as he now continues to race down with Mikel Astaloza, who rides for a French team, but he is Spanish and well known in Australia. He was a brilliant winner of the Jacobs Creek Tour Down Under this year, and that runs in the month of January in South Australia, in fact, in Adelaide. And I'll tell you what, Paul, that was his first win of his career.
It was a very good win as well, and it set him up for a lot of good things to come as well throughout the past. Because I tell you one thing, that was a little bit dangerous there. It looked as if there's a few sheep coming down off the mountain. I think 1 or 2 riders may be worried about that. Astroloza, by the way, is pretty high up in the overall classification. He started the day in 18th place, 4 minutes and 20 seconds in arrears, but only a couple of minutes behind Lance Armstrong. So they won't let him get too far off the front, and I think it must be somebody's little daughter.
Indeed, indeed. And there is the peloton, not taking any risks at all here. What they are taking are a few deep breaths, waiting for the final assault to come as we go through Bordeaux and onto the Alpe itself. And they know how steep it is. It starts violently steep, and that holds for about 8 or 9 kilometers. It levels a little bit. Then you get the first horrible sight of Alpe d'Huez itself and all the chalets. And the chalets look like little ants on top of the mountain, and you've still got to climb another 5 kilometers.
You know, the funny thing about Alpe d'Huez is, as an actual climb on its own, it's not really that difficult if you start at the bottom and ride up to the top. But to put it into perspective, these guys have done 200 kilometers, 125 miles before they start climbing, and that's what makes the Alpe d'Huez so difficult. These men here at the back end of the race just trying to survive. That looks as if it might be Nick Gates coming over the top here, riding the Tour de France for his first time. and he is a member
He's
of
actually riding better as the race is getting harder. He's had a bit of a tough opening. It's his first Tour de France. He comes from Taree in New South Wales. He's a teammate of Robin McEwen, and you know, he is getting better. He had a very good ride yesterday.
He had a very good ride, and he actually said he was looking forward to getting into the big mountain passes, because he said, in fact, Phil, that would actually slow down the race a bit.
Yes, well, the Aussies are never short of a quip or two, that's for sure. It's a record entry from Australia this year, but it's not an entry. You have to be selected, and there are 7 of them riding this year. I think it's fair to say, too, sadly missed is Cadell Evans, 2 broken collarbones this year. Would have been the team leader of Telecom. The way it's working out, they really are missing him.
They certainly are missing him. Well, he'll come back next year and have another crack at the Tour de France, and hopefully he'll be able to keep himself upright and not break those collarbones again. These 2 leaders now forming a fairly serious alliance at the front end of the race. Astroloza is the man in 2nd place. Didier Roos is the man in 1st, and their advantage a nice 43 seconds over the main field. And right now, Phil, I would have to tell you that I don't think Armstrong's team really needs to chase them down at all.
No, of course not. Not just now, anyway. They're still a fair way down. The 4 minutes 20 and 5 minutes 19 respectively, their overall deficit. But of course, every man is a danger. If he gets back that lost time, the yellow jersey awaits. And Michael Bogart just slipping through our picture there. He had a very nasty accident in a feed zone a few days ago and had to have his knee stitched on the move.
David Miller's got himself back into the action too.
Back.
He's put a daredevil descent in off the summit of the Col du Galibier to keep himself at the front end of the overall classification. In fact, he's still pretty high up. He's 23rd overall, but over the last 2 days he really has suffered in the mountains, and he, I think, here is taking on board drinks because he looked after his teammate David Moncoutier, who was ridden very well over the Galibier. He stayed in contact with all the heads of state, and we are riding just a little bit slower because many riders now feel starting to reintegrate the front end of the pack.
Well, there's one of 3 riders, and I think it's probably Ivan Basso has just come back as well for Fassa Bortolo. And it is Ivan Basso. There's only 3 of them left, so it wasn't a great deal of skill in guessing who it was there, really?
Well, not really, but it could have been Dario Cioni, because he was, in fact, a pretty good bike rider when it comes into the mountains. One of the tough men who's managed to hang good for Fassa Bortolo. Only 3 riders left in the race, Basso, Brusegin and Cioni. The 2 leaders, though, Phil, they have got around about 20 kilometers of descending. And it's really quite strange. You think going downhill would be quite easy, but in fact it is a difficult discipline as well. You have to take risks in the corners. You have to line yourself up properly to make sure that you cut the apex correctly and you don't lose too much time or impetus going around these corners. This is a very fast descent. It's not all that steep and technical, and you do have to keep the gears right up at the top end of the clusters.
And still, as it was up the hill, as we go down, it's US Postal leading the charge. As we head down now towards Villars d'Arène. We're now in the high Alps here, the Haute Alpes area of France. And the riders, do they need to be reminded of that? I wonder. This bunch is getting bigger. It's now built to approximately 50 riders on the way down. We haven't seen the return of Michael Rogers, but he must be catching up.
He's got a good chance because the pressure is not on all that much in the front end of the main field. We saw Gilberto Simoni bridge a gap of 1 minute. That was his deficit at the top of the Col du Galibier. Michael Rogers crossed that 2.5 minutes behind, and he could possibly have the chance to catch up with the main field before the start of the final climb of the day, the Alpe d'Huez. There's the leader of the bike race, the yellow jersey, Richard Veron. In fact, not too many teammates left for him in this group, and he's having to go back to the car for drinks on his own. We were discussing, Phil, the other day about the yellow jersey having to go and get his own drinks. Well, poor old Richard Veron doesn't have any teammates to look after him here, and he's got the red jersey there as the most aggressive bike rider in the race.
That might be a first since we introduced the number. I'm not sure, but I don't think anybody who's been in yellow at the same time as being the king of the mountains and also the most aggressive rider. That means a red number for the most aggressive rider of the race. He's rightfully the owner of the polka dot jersey as leader of the king of the mountains, but he can't wear that today. He can only wear 1 jersey. And of course he is the leader of the Tour, which makes up the big difference.
Well, the most aggressive rider is a competition which is actually voted for. They're awarded points by a jury of men who've been involved with the Tour de France for an awful long time. The boss of the jury, none other than Jean-Marie Leblanc, the organizer of the Tour de France, and Jean-François Pecheur, the man we saw earlier on the mountain shouting out of the team car. He is one of the judges there, along with Philippe Bouvet, and a few journalists as well. Jean Montois from the AFP. And Rodrigo Benekens, a very good colleague of ours from the Belgian TV. They vote for the man who they regard as being the most aggressive on each stage. The points at the end of the Tour de France are added up to give the award to the most aggressive bike rider in the whole of the 3-week race. And in the past, one of our favourite bike riders, not at the Tour de France this year, has won that on a couple of occasions, Jackie Durand.
Yes, sadly Jackie crashed just before this tour and is watching on television. He broke some bones, and that's it for him. These are the two leaders now. The first check coming at us. Well, as I said that, our computer came up with 2 question marks, which means they're in the process of doing a time check. But it was a minute, and I would think it is now closing down again. La Grave, the grave. This is where Paul Sherwin was saying, at the bottom of the drop off the Col du Galibier. And there is confirmation now. 61 seconds is the gap between Astalotha and Didier Roos, twice a national champion of France in the past 3 years. The peloton still continuing their long descent as they go underground for a short while on the Col du Galibier.
Well, it's a rather tricky descent with rather a large number of tunnels on the way down here, and the chance for the riders on 1 or 2 occasions to see some rather large hydroelectric schemes. And I tell you what, temperatures like they are today, Phil, well up above 90 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius. Many of these riders would probably think about taking a nice left-hand turn and cooling themselves down, but the 2 men in the lead haven't got time to think about any of that right now. They're building up a serious advantage over the chasers. 61 seconds was the last time gap that these 2 men, Didier Roos of France in the red, white and blue, the tricolour of championship, and joined by the Spanish rider on the French team, Mikel Astroloza. They have built themselves up a good margin right now, and I don't think the team of Lance Armstrong are really putting the hammer down. Again, they are almost, Phil, taunting the other teams to come forward and do the work if they want to win the stages.
This is why this race is so interesting, because once they get to Alpe d'Huez, there's no holding back those that want to attack. That is a mountain born for the attacking rider. And it's not the end of the Alps today. Tomorrow we go to Gap and we climb the Col de Lauterre and the Col d'Izoard, 2 very, very difficult climbs in any Tour de France. And the Izoard, one of the most famous climbs of the 100-year history of the Tour.
Tough thing is that when they get out of bed in the morning, they actually have to come back along this same road that they're descending right now to go up to the summit of the Col de Lauterre. It's not very much a difficult climb, but it does climb up for around about 28 kilometers. They drop down then into Briançon and then move away from the Italian border to that very difficult climb of the Izoard. But today is really the rendezvous of the climbers. It has become over the years a mythical place, Phil, that all of the climbers want to win in. Armstrong has done that himself. Richard Veron would dream of winning here, but I don't think he will have it in his legs after the performance of yesterday. As we go further back down the course, this is the Gruppetto, the Autobus. This is the group of riders who just want to survive the day if they can. They've already lost themselves 22 minutes. I would expect to see Robbie McEwen in this group alongside Baden Cook. Baden Cook will be wearing the green jersey, if you can spot him, as leader of the points competition.
I actually think Baden has already gone over. He was riding pretty well. Robbie has sat up very early on. I'm just looking for the face of Robbie McEwen as we pan down there. I haven't spotted him yet, but every conference this is where he will be, because this is a very, very large group of riders coming up now. There's Eric Zabel on the right, who is the big rival and of Robbie McEwen for that green jersey, and of course Baden Cook, who is the current leader of that competition. The tail end goes through. I'm still looking for him. There goes Eric Zabel now.
Cookie. It looks like he hasn't crumbled after all.
And Stuart O'Grady is in this group as well. Didn't see Robbie McEwen, but I cannot believe it. There he is, just gone over the top. McEwen is on the back there, keeping an eye on everybody as usual.
Huge glacier right up above the riders this afternoon, and that is the glacier of La Meige, and it's not far away from here. And in fact, the drive down yesterday, we could actually see Mont Blanc soaring in the distance. We're not too very far away from it this afternoon.
One of the prettiest sights, I have to say, I can imagine over 30 years of covering the Tour de France. The moon, it was a full moon reflecting right across the top of the White Mountain, and it really was a stunning sight on the drive to the Alpe d'Huez. Good pace-making by these two. They're getting away from the bunch at the moment on the Valley Road. They're scarping towards Bourg d'Oisans, Then they'll go left in that village, which is packed with tens of thousands of people, and they can't afford to slow down on the Alpe, Paul, because the people will keep them up.
It's actually remarkable. I remember riding to the summit of the Alpe d'Huez one time, Phil, and I was way off the back of the race. But in fact, riding through the last 2 kilometers, it's not quite the same nowadays because the riders are protected with barriers. It was a wall of people and a wall of noise, and I hardly felt myself pedal over the last 2 kilometers. It is really quite a remarkable place to come to. But this is the valley before we reach the Alpe d'Huez, and I don't think I have ever seen such magnificent pictures as a backdrop of the Tour de France as we are getting this year.
Well, we saw the barrage du Chambon, that was the waterfall. Now we can see the lake where all the water goes to, and it is absolutely stunning. The riders are down there on that bottom road right now. As we go back, this is Jimmy Casper here coming up. We are half an hour plus now since the crossing of the Col de Galibier.
Well, Jimmy Casper, if you remember the first week of the Tour de France, was the man who crashed on day number 1. He was on the ground for a long time after the other riders had crossed the finish. He was put into a neck brace. He rode day 2 and 3 with a neck brace on his neck in the race. He wanted so much to stay in the Tour de France, and now he is still surviving over the mountain passes. You must remember that there are so many different kind of riders, Phil. Some of these guys can climb, and some of them just have to survive in the mountains, and Jimmy Casper is one of those.
We've got to feel sorry for him.
Oh, he's done a great job. You know, the first 2 days riding with that neck brace, I really felt sorry for him because it was exceptionally hot. He's a long way behind. He's still got a good chance of finishing inside of the time limit, but the 2 leaders are stealing a very nice advantage over the group here, led by Armstrong's teammate. Mikel Astroloza and Didier Roos are currently 1 minute and 40 seconds ahead.
The peloton getting stronger and bigger by the minute. Great news is that Michael Rogers from Canberra in Australia, the youngster in the race, is back in this group. He's done a lovely chase. He's bridged over 2+ minutes to get down there. There's life on the lake here. The lake here at Chambon. And, well, that water must look so inviting to these riders because they're racing along on its shoulders right now. But, of course, they're racing to Bourg-Bazon, steadily downhill for the moment. Chance for a few deep breaths. And it is getting bigger, that peloton. Looks to be about...
Oh, there's a crash. Someone's gone down right at the front end of the main field. There's a touch of wheels.
Well, that's a US Postal rider who's gone.
Heras has gone down. He had the problem. I think they just touched wheels there. He's back up and running very quickly. The team mechanic is right up alongside him. 2 riders from US Postal, the riders there, Phil, touched wheels and went down very rapid. I don't think there was anything wrong with Roberto Heras at all. Let's have a look at it again from the helicopter.
Well, you need
it was
good eyes
right
here,
at the
Paul.
front end of the main field. They just touched on the right-hand side there.
Yep. Now, no idea what happened there at all. There was fanning of the riders, 2 US Postal riders involved in their own crash situation there. Heras left on the roadside to fix his bike. It won't be a crucial problem at the moment because the peloton won't attack. There's a little unwritten rule, and they'll wait for him to... Well, they won't wait, but they'll allow him back in if he can come up, and I think he can.
Well, he'll come back because the only team setting the pace on the front were his own teammates right now. They have all shut down completely. They'll allow him to come back into the pack, but let's hope that hasn't left too much of an injury on Roberto Heras, who for the most part of today has had a very good ride in the event, because maybe they're holding back to try and use Roberto Heras as the secret weapon when we attack on the final climb of the day.
Well, they certainly don't want to see too many shocks like that, because the situation at the moment, these 2 riders are going clear. The gap is nearly 1 3/4 minutes, and they were unaware, of course, of the crash behind with Heras. Nasty shock, but I think that's all it was. It looked to me as though he was back on his bike pretty quickly. Freewheeling style now of Didier Roos, just keeping the speed around 50-55 kilometers an hour.
I wonder if it was Lance Armstrong, in fact, who was involved in that crash, because the other rider did not do anything at all or hesitate to wait for Roberto Heras, and it could have been Armstrong. It's so difficult to see from that altitude, but in fact Race Radio are suggesting it might have been Armstrong, and the way that he actually reacted there, Phil, I think it could have been.
Well, it was very close to the front, and Armstrong, but it wasn't at the front, and Armstrong was sitting behind the teammates, 4th or 5th in line, and that's where it seemed to happen. I agree.
And Heras has always been on the tail of Armstrong for the whole of today. US Postal are a most magnificently drilled team. They're doing a great job here for Armstrong, and the man who's really enjoying it there is Richard Veron. And confirmation there, Phil, at last that it is Michael Rogers in the group with his teammate there, Richard Veron. great to see him up there. He's, let's not forget, riding his Tour de France for the first time. He started the day in 15th place overall, 3rd in the Best Young Rider competition. We tipped him as a winner of the Prologue time trial a week ago, but unfortunately, Phil, I think what happened there was he got stage fright when he saw just how big the Tour de France was, but he'll come back.
I agree, indeed. I think, you know, he thought when he'd won the Tour of Belgium this year, and he finished great also with the first place in the Tour of Germany and the Route du Sud just before the Tour de France, he thought he'd seen big races. When he got to the Tour de France, he had no idea of the size of this race. 4,500 people on the Tour caravan, and 1,000 of those are media, television cameras, radio and writing press, and the pressure goes on, and he knew they were expecting something special from him. And I think you're right, he suffered from stage fright, but he's got into the swing of things now, and he's only 23.5 years old.
I hope he doesn't get stage fright again when he starts the Alpe d'Huez here this afternoon, Phil, because there's a reported 500,000 spectators in a distance of just 13 kilometers. It's going to be absolutely mad, and I don't think I've ever seen quite as many camper vans up here. They're parked all around the television compound, right the way down the evacuation road, all the way down to the bottom, and the valley road is full of them as well. It's going to be a big day here, a big showdown, and I wonder how Armstrong is. Looking at him there in about 4th position, he doesn't seem to have any scar or any injury to his body, and his teammate Roberto Harris has got right back up to the front as well, but it must have been rather a panic moment for US Postal when that crash happened.
It must have been, but they look okay, and they're back at the front of the race, and that's all that matters. The latest check we've got at 25 kilometers, it was officially 2 minutes 40 seconds, and now we're at 22 kilometers to go. They've nudged it to 3 minutes. Now, to have any chance, I still think they need 5 minutes at the front of the climb, but it's going closer.
It's getting closer all the time. This is David Miller there, a silhouette against the sky, against the shape of the Alps. He managed to recover over the last few kilometers of the Galibier and get himself back into the event. He must have made a serious daredevil descent to reintegrate the front end of the peloton. But right now, it's still the French in command. They've got two teams from France represented at the front end of the main field. One of them is the French national champion Didier Rousse, and he is currently leading the race by 3 minutes with the Spanish rider on a French team, Mikel Astrolodza. They're both, Phil, working exceptionally well together, and they are building up a pretty serious advantage, but that doesn't mean that they've got this race in their bag by far. And still, US Postal setting the tempo. They're leaving all of the challengers in their wake at the moment, and if anybody else wants to win stages, they need to come forward and do a certain amount of pacemaking.
Well, they're about 7 kilometers now from the start of the climb. Everybody in this group will know the climb of Alpe d'Huez. If they haven't ridden up it, they'll have read about it. They'll know the road as if they've been up it before. It is a fabled part of this great race. First came into the Tour in 1952 when the Campionissimo from Italy, Fausto Coppi, managed to catch the little Frenchman Jean Robic and then rode away to victory. And they didn't put it back in the Tour for over 20 years, but it's a regular appearance for it now. And they're heading down, still steadily downhill, as we head down towards Les Alberges and then into the town of Bourg d'Oisans. That's where everybody is waiting to cheer the riders on the way up the mountain. Massive campsites, totally full of people, and they're wise people because they're staying at the bottom for the quick escape after the race finishes tonight.
Yeah, it really has become an unbelievable place over the last few years, and even for someone like myself, a non-climber, when I was racing, it was always a magic moment when you came here to the Alpe d'Huez, because it is a magnificently beautiful place, Phil, as well. The views from the summit here are incredible when you look down over the valley floor, and these two guys right now don't have time at all to look about the view and the beauty of the area that they're traversing, because all they're thinking about is building up as much lead as they can before they start this very difficult climb. 13.8 kilometers, an average of almost 7%, and it kicks up immediately. You turn off the main road in Bourg d'Oisans, and it looks like a wall right in front of your face.
A little earring there of Didier Rousse. I should imagine that the perspiration might turn that a little bit mouldy. I hope it's a good quality one that he's got in at the moment. A little bit of help to here too for Mikel Astrolodza. Everything going well, you said. You've got nearly 3 minutes. We'll know, though, that he needs 5. He's a good climber, strong man, so too is Didier Rousse. but they'll need 5 because the infighting which will go on in this bunch could be an automatic chase down of them.
Well, look at this long line in the main group right now. In fact, I think US Postal are starting to turn up the pressure just a certain amount, because the most recent time check has shown that the time advantage of the 2 leaders is starting to come back down again, because it has now finally gone inside of 3 minutes. It's a 2.5 minutes advantage. This is Grisha Neerman here riding for Rabobank. He's just been to the back end of the race to try and pick up some bottles for the team. This is his first attempt at the Tour de France, and he actually his 4th attempt at the Tour de France, I should say, and in fact he finished 24th the first time round.
Had a bit of a struggle. He retired from the Tour once in 2001, gave up on stage 17, which probably put it in this very region actually on that occasion. It might have even been on the road to Alpe d'Huez, and last year he finished it in 51st place. But he looks as though he's having a bit of problem at the back of the race just now. This is a long entourage of following cars here for just 2 men, but while the gap is at 2 minutes 49, they won't worry about that. They'll be removed though if there's signs of a return of the peloton.
Didier Rousse, pretty good time trialist throughout his career. He's won several time trials in races around the circuit, and he's also guarded himself the French National Championships on 2 occasions. These men right now are still holding on to a major part of their advantage, which is hovering between 2 minutes and 30 seconds and 2 minutes 50 seconds. And they're slowly but surely getting themselves closer to the town of Bourg d'Oisans. And that is where the climb will start. And once they go through Bourg d'Oisans, well, it's basically no question about what's going to happen. It's 13.8 kilometers uphill to the summit. 181 is Didier Rousse. He's the champion of France, and he's going through 20 kilometers to go, and the official time check coming through at 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Floyd Landis has been back to the team car for the boys to get them drinks and keep them replenished with plenty of water. One man I haven't seen much of this afternoon actually is Yatislav Ekimov, who I would have expected to have been at the front end of the race with the rest of the team. He must have missed the move with Pavel Padrinos and of course Victor Hugo Peña. That is the long line that takes the riders now finally to the foot of this magical climb known as the Alpe d'Huez, reputedly the most difficult climb in the Alps with 21 corners, and today around about 500,000 spectators at the side of the road looking to see who's going to be the champion of the Alps. Didier Rousse is looking here to try and be a Frenchman getting victory at the summit of the Alpe d'Huez as the national champion. And in fact, the last Frenchman to win here was no other than Bernard Hinault back in 1986 when he crossed the line ahead of Greg LeMond, both of them basically in the same time. Peter Winnen, who's not far away from us right now, won the race here on 2 occasions in 1981 and 1983. The first Colombian to win a massive stage of the Tour de France was Lucho Herrera back in 1984, and we are hoping that we will see him presenting the prize to the winner at the end of today's stage. He's come across here for the celebrations of the 100th anniversary of the Tour de France, and as many of the winners at the summit of the Alpe d'Huez were fated last night at a special reception here up at the summit of this incredible climb. But the 2 leaders are still rolling along the valley floor and still holding on to a certain amount of their lead. But in the main field right now, I think the men of Lance Armstrong are setting this up for a pretty serious showdown on the slopes of the Alpe. Looking back down the road there, that's where we've come from. And we went over the summit of the Col du Galibier after 100 miles of racing. These riders now have done around about a 25-mile descent, and we're looking very shortly to try and look for the showdown on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez.
I really think now, Paul, that these 2 riders, as they race towards Bourg d'Oisans and the climb to Alpe d'Huez itself, they still need a little bit more time. It's actually reversing on them now. 2:41 for Astalosa and Didier Rousse.
Well, you know, they can easily lose a couple of minutes on this climb. And in fact, a few years ago, when Lance Armstrong rode up this climb in a time of 38 minutes, which is the 2nd fastest ascent of the Alpe d'Huez, he was 2 minutes faster than Jan Ullrich. To put it into perspective, it's so easy to lose that amount of time on this very vicious climb. These guys have now turned off the main road. They're looking to try and find the final corner to the start of the climb to the summit of the Alpe d'Huez. They've just gone inside of 15 kilometers to go. The climb itself is 13.8 kilometers, and it's an average gradient of 7.9%. The foot of the climb is really the most difficult. It's 10.5%, but halfway through, with about 10 kilometers covered, it kicks up to a dramatic and difficult 11.5%. You see these riders now are taking off their helmets. The rules of international cycling right now are you must always wear a hard shell helmet unless the race finishes on a climb which is more than 5 kilometers in length. Well, this one is certainly longer than that, so Didier Roos has decided he wants to get rid of that. And I think Mikel Astroloza is going to do exactly the same thing. They just went past the banner there indicating hats off, and this is why. This is why the Alpe d'Huez has become the mythical rendezvous of the climbers. There is an unbelievable amount of people make the pilgrimage here to see the Tour de France on every year that the race comes down here.
Just look at the massive, massive crowd here now. The first two riders onto the slopes of Alpe d'Huez, and this is going to be the noisiest corridor as they continue the climb now side by side. They will try to help each other now to hold off the field. They've gone onto the climb, Paul, with a lead of 2.5 minutes.
Hold on, Phil, this is unbelievable right now as we look at the crowds here. They're absolutely remarkable. This is the biggest crowd we've ever seen over the years here at the Alpe d'Huez. We're 13.8 kilometers from the summit right now. These two men escaped around about 40 kilometers ago. They've had a hard chase down the 40-kilometer valley descent, but right now the race has kicked up into their faces, almost banging them over the head as the race referee, and in fact the race organizer there, Jean-Marie Leblanc, looks back to see what sort of development is happening behind. He wants to keep the race clear. He wants to keep the race wide. He wants to keep the race open because he knows there will be a huge battle.
It's a fabled climb, as you've already seen. It's played a huge part in the Tour history, and I hope now you can sit back and enjoy the climb with us today. These two riders have made the first attack, but I'm not so sure they can hold back the rush that will surely come. Just looking at the face here of Mikel Astroloza, he's made a brave move away from the giant Col de Galibier. He's got to the slopes with Didier Roos, but here comes the cavalry. The US Postal boys are heading the race now. They've got 6 men down there, and the 5 men are working for one. They want to launch Lance Armstrong into the attack. 2 years ago, Lance Armstrong wasted no time before the attack.
They're putting the pressure on right now. Armstrong has sent his men to the front. This is Roberto Heras. He's been kept in arrears all day, Phil. He's been sitting behind Armstrong. He's been taking the pace from his leader, Armstrong, and right now they want to do something special. At the back, these boys have done the job. This man has disappeared. Georgie Hincapie has set an unbelievable pace. He's out of it right now. He's just going to cruise to the summit. They've hit him hard in the first kilometre.
But this is such a typical move by the rider from US Postal. He's told his boys, flat out, peel off and get out of my way. Armstrong sitting third wheel here and just waiting for the move. Richard Veron, the man who won yesterday, rapidly losing ground. If he loses 2.5 minutes, Armstrong will be in the lead.
Armstrong has got 3 very good climbers around him. Manuel Beltran, Roberto Heras and his old teammate Chechu Rubiera. The race is blowing apart. Rubiera looks like he's taking over the pacemaking now. Armstrong, cool as a cucumber, right on his shoulder there. Alexander Vinokurov. This is the damage that's being done at the back.
Well, David Miller got into this group after a great descent of the Col de Galibier. He's just ahead of his teammate here. Number 66 is David Moncoutier. Miller just ahead of him, but already under pressure. Alexander Vinokurov there in the centre of our picture is defying the attack here by Rubiera and Lance Armstrong. Richard Veron trying to recover here from the early acceleration. The big 2 men we have yet to identify, and that is Joshiba Beloki and Jan Ulrich, but they will have been shocked by this move.
They will have been surprised by the viciousness of the attack in the first kilometre of the ascent. Look at that though, Phil, not too far behind. The man who has been riding this broken collarbone throughout the Tour de France, Tyler Hamilton, is not far off the lead.
I cannot believe that Tyler Hamilton, who crashed on stage 1, he fractured his collarbone in 2 places. The doctors keep taking x-rays to make sure he's not doing long-term damage, is right there at the head of this race. It is totally incredible. Now, Jan Ullrich, he's just gone through our picture to the right, but that wasn't him, I don't think. I think that was probably Aitor Garmendia who just went down there. We're looking now for the number of the yellow jersey. There he is, Richard Veron. It'll take a while for our motorbikes with the cameras to get to the leaders. There is 500,000 people on the roads of Alpe d'Huez today.
Armstrong has got his faithful lieutenants around him. Chechu Rubiera is the man on the front right now, still in arrears there. To the right-hand side was Roberto Heras. Christophe Moreau is there in the green and white jersey of France. And again, they kick deep. They're looking for something special. Jan Ullrich is not anywhere there, Phil. Tyler Hamilton accelerates to get onto the wheel of Armstrong's train, but I haven't seen Jan Ullrich yet, and that's why they've gone hard. Armstrong is not really worried about Richard Veron. He's got a 2-minute 37-second advantage in the overall classification, but Armstrong knows this man is not a long-term threat. The man he's worried about, the man he wants to put time between himself and today, is Jan Ullrich, and Ullrich for the moment is not there.
But sat there in 4th wheel is Tyler Hamilton, who is in so much pain when he steps out of the bicycle because his right collarbone is still broken in 2 places. It is unbelievable he can ride even these slopes alongside a man like Armstrong.
This is guts, this is courage. This man stayed in the Tour de France. We asked him on many occasions, why are you doing it? Is it because it's the Tour de France? He said, no, I've got phenomenal form this year. I want to ride well. I want to finish the Tour de France. I cannot believe what he's done, Phil. He crashed on day 1, a double fracture to the clavicule, and he's still in the bike race, and he's still accelerating. He's still looking comfortable. He's now on the wheel of his former team captain and team leader, Lance Armstrong, and he doesn't look like he's suffering too much.
They're friends off the bike, and that's unusual. When you leave the team of Lance Armstrong, you don't stay friends either, but they are friends, and now they're going to have to fight each other on Alpe d'Huez. And I see also that Iban Mayo, the great hope from Spain, has also latched on in that orange jersey. Missing, though, Yoshiba Beloki and Jan Ullrich and all of the fancied men. And this in itself is amazing. Number 18 here, Marcus Serrano, a good climber, but not in the class of those riders going clear. The yellow jersey of Richard Veron and Michael Rogers of Australia on the right there. This young man who finished 4th yesterday and is flying the flag for Australia, still in amongst the second file of riders on this massive climb, which is absolutely crowded with people, and this will continue now for the next 9 miles or 14 kilometers to the summit. Looking at Heras here, Heras just riding so strongly on the front. He was on the floor not 5 miles back. He's now riding to try and launch his team leader to the front. That looks like it might be Jan Ullrich just ahead. This is David Moncoutier here. The yellow jersey of Richard Veron. I think Veron riding sensibly. He couldn't go with that initial surge, but he's not lost his position yet.
Phil, a couple of years ago when the race came here and Armstrong won, Richard Veron lost himself 2.5 minutes, but he didn't have the yellow jersey on his shoulder. This is the front of the race. The attack's coming right now. Astrolosa trying to get rid of the French national champion Didier Rousse in 2nd position there, wearing number 181, the leader of the Brioche La Boulangère team. But the gap now is actually inside of 50 seconds. Here is big Jan Ullrich. He's alongside Stefano Garzelli.
Not too sure where he is on the actual road here at the moment, though. We'll have to find out as we pick up all the rest. The head of the race is Mikel Astolosa and Didier Rousse. Astolosa trying to get rid of Didier Rousse at the moment. This is the next group on the road. Roberto Heras, Armstrong, Hamilton, Mayo, Vinokurov. Here comes Beloki, and just behind him Lyseca. Look further down now. There's no sign of Ullrich. He must be much further down the mountain here. There he is now, led by Garzelli, trying to get back into the race.
Well, I tell you what, Jan Ullrich is in serious difficulty right now, but he must not panic. He must try and find a rhythm that is comfortable for himself. The race is really going to be a showdown, and I have a feeling Richard Veron is going to have to do something special to try and keep in the yellow jersey here this afternoon. Jan Ullrich is also riding himself a very sensible tempo. Veron is not too worried. He's not trying to win the Tour de France. He's alongside Michael Rogers. Phil, the young Aussie is doing a brilliant ride. He's 23 years of age, and he's riding alongside the greats. But look at the face on this man. Lance Armstrong is looking to try and conquer the Tour de France for the 5th time, but I think the hearts of the Americans this year in the Tour are going to go to the man just behind him.
Well,
Tyler Hamilton, double fracture of the clavicle, still in the race after 9 days.
Hamilton is riding with the form of his life. As we look now, Christophe Moreau dropping back here. Big hope for the French, but he wasn't really expected to stay with the quality of these riders up front at the moment. But Tyler Hamilton, he won the Tour of Romandy this year in brilliant style. He is on form and has been since he finished second in the prologue in the Paris-Nice race in March. Going off the back now, number 31 here, Francesco Mancebo. He's the team leader of iBenesto.com. We're also losing the leader of Fassa Bortolo's Ivan Basso. All of the stars of the other teams are being shed at the moment.
Now we know why the team of Lance Armstrong turned up the screws on that final climb there to the summit of the Col du Galibier. It was because they wanted to make the race difficult for the final ascent of the day. We're now looking here at number 28 riding for Team Telecom, Alexander Vinokurov. He, a few moments ago, was with Lance Armstrong. Armstrong must be just around the corner. The two leaders, I don't know how they're doing it, but they are surviving. Their advantage over the group, being led by Armstrong and Mayo, is now less than 1 minute. He's still got a teammate up there alongside him, and this time it's going to be Beloki has gone. Beloki has come back from nowhere, and he's now launched the attack. He said he would attack Armstrong in the Alpine passes, and this is quite remarkable to see that he's doing just what he said he would do.
Well, Paul, now it's up to Lance Armstrong. Heras was the man who started all the work at the bottom of the climb.
Well,
there's
Heras
the attack.
Heras is there, and Armstrong has seen the attack coming from Yoshiba Beloki. The Once riders have been sitting in the wings all day. They've been sitting there in great numbers. They've been waiting to come up with this attack, and right now Yoshiba Beloki has gone. Put the hammer down. Armstrong is going to ask a lot of Roberto Heras this afternoon, but Roberto Heras has been sitting in the wings, just waiting to try and turn up the screws when he could. This is a great and brave move by Yoshiba Beloki, second in the Tour de France last year. Hamilton is in this group, and the two riders from Euskaltel-Euskadi are also a major threat.
Yoshiba Beloki said this morning he's ridden the Tour 3 times, he's finished third twice. Last year he finished second to Lance Armstrong. He says, if I can't win it this year, I shall reassess my chances in the future, and I may never ride the race again. So this is a big attack for him.
It's a huge attack. He wants to attack Armstrong anywhere that he can, but the damage of the attack is incredible. He's caught the two leaders. He's number one on the road right now.
This is a superb attack by Yoshiba Beloki, the man who could haunt Lance Armstrong, second to him last year. If he wins this stage, if he drops Lance Armstrong, he'll be one of the first men to do that for a few years.
He will be one of the first men to put Armstrong into difficulty. Armstrong didn't look like he was panicking there right now. He'd allowed the attack to develop. He was using his teammate Roberto Heras to the maximum of his advantage. He's got Heras up there alongside him. Iban Mayo is very comfortable. Tyler Hamilton is looking great. This man is going to ride high into the overall classification at the end of today. Armstrong is just sitting and waiting.
Well, look at the face to the right of Armstrong, Tyler Hamilton here. He's pulling out the performance of a lifetime on Alpe d'Huez. Where is the best place to do that in the Tour de France? It is right here. We're climbing it now for the 23rd time in this race. It has never failed to produce a dramatic finish. This rider here has said he doesn't want to ever finish second again in the Tour de France. He wants to win it. We didn't believe he had the legs to attack Armstrong. He has proved us wrong.
At 10 kilometers to go, Richard Veron has already lost 2 minutes on the group containing Lance Armstrong. He's only got 37 seconds left to keep himself in the yellow jersey. He's going to lose it. I thought he'd keep hold of it. He's on the eve of Bastille Day, the 14 Juillet. The yellow jersey of Richard Veron has popped, but right now Armstrong is being put under threat by Yoshiba Beloki. He needs to pull him back before the summit.
Let's not forget too, our camera's staying with the likely projected final winner of the Tour de France, but there are still two riders leading the day in Astaloza and Didier Roos. Oh, sorry, they've already been passed by. It's all happening so fast on this climb. We're looking at Armstrong. I am beginning to think, Paul, I don't believe Armstrong is going as well as we thought, because this man is too proud to allow an attack.
He's too proud to allow an attack from Yoshiba Beloki. He's always reacted to them in the past. This is the leader of the bike race. This is Richard Veron. He's way down the course right now. He's being joined there by one of Jan Ulrich's teammates who's coming up alongside him. This, in fact, is Felix Garcia Casas. But Beloki has now got a 12-second advantage over Armstrong. That is not a major panic. And in fact, Armstrong himself, race radio is telling me, Phil, has taken up the pacemaking himself.
He's got no choice now. He's used all of his teammates up. They're all due to fall behind. But look at Tyler Hamilton hanging on to the coattail of Armstrong as he continues with his broken collarbone. If he jumps out of the saddle, you'll see his face wince with pain. The doctors take him away at night. They examine him and tell him if he is doing any long-term damage. And he comes out of those examinations smiling.
Comes out of his examination smiling. He's got a joke for everybody. He's raised the morale of the team. I cannot believe the way he's sitting here on the shoulder of Lance Armstrong. And if you get a glimpse at his jersey there, which is open to try and keep him cool, he's got a bandage right across his broken clavicule, which is quite remarkable. Further down the road, though, this is Roberto Heras. He will try and ride himself back up to Armstrong to help him. But I think your question here, Phil, has been answered. Armstrong is slowly pulling himself back to the attack here of Yoshiba Beloki.
Well, Yoshiba Beloki is on the attack, and it's up to the others and Armstrong now to bring him back.
Yoshiba Beloki now is being chased all the way to the line by Lance Armstrong, but what a remarkable performance by Tyler Hamilton. The man crashed. Beloki is now 7 kilometers from the summit, and these people at the side of the road will support anybody. Armstrong is slowly but surely tickling away at the pedals. He's come closer to Yoshiba Beloki. Beloki had opened up an advantage of 12 seconds over Lance Armstrong, but Armstrong didn't worry at all. He used his teammates. He is such a master tactician. He allowed them to set the pace for as long as he could, and once they were no longer able to lift it to the pace that he wanted, he closed the race down completely. He has brought it all back together. The race now is made up of 4 riders. It's all together.
Paul, this is unbelievable. Armstrong won't remember this before, as the catch and comes the attack. Iban Mayo. Well, the great cyclist Pedro Delgado, who won the Tour de France in 1988, said to us yesterday, Mayo, he won't win the Tour de France. He might try for a stage win. I think he's found his legs. We've always talked about this man as a star of the future.
He's a star of the future, that's for certain. Armstrong is not too worried about him.
He won't react to Mayo just yet.
Not a problem. Mayo is a long way down in the overall classification, Phil. He's 6 minutes and 11 seconds down on Lance Armstrong. Armstrong was more worried about the attack coming from Yoshiba Beloki. But what really amazes me is Tyler Hamilton. This boy is doing an unbelievable job. He's staying there in contact with the big guns of the Tour de France. And there's another move by Beloki. Beloki is trying again to get rid of Armstrong. Armstrong will react to this one, though. Now he has to react to every move that comes. Look at the time gap. This is the gap now between Iban Mayo and Armstrong. It's 10 seconds. It's 2 minutes and 22 seconds back to the group of Richard Veron, and he does not. Oh, Hamilton's gone.
I don't believe it. Hamilton has gone this time. He's attacking Lance Armstrong. It hasn't worked. Armstrong's reacted. Beloki also going. Once you have one attack, you have another. We've never seen a climb like this before.
We've never seen anybody attacking the leader quite as repetitively as this.
They believe he's vulnerable. They
do.
Actually believe Armstrong can be beaten.
The only way he can be beaten is if several riders attack him consistently over and over again. And that's what they've decided to do. That's what the big leaders of the Tour de France say that they will do to try and dislodge Armstrong from the top. You don't catch him out like that, though. And in fact, there's another rider coming forward here. It looks like David Echevarria of the Euskaltel-Euskadi team.
What a superb piece of cycling we are witnessing here as they attack and counter-attack.
Well, that was a pretty dramatic few moments there for Lance Armstrong, but he responded to every attack that was thrown at him. Further down the road, we can see the yellow jersey of Richard Veron. He started the day, and another move coming from Tyler Hamilton. Hamilton again trying to open up time between himself and Lance Armstrong, and if anybody in the world knows Armstrong well, it's Tyler Hamilton. He was his teammate and his lieutenant for many, many years, but it was Beloki who responded. But Armstrong looks cool. He responds to every one of these moves. This is the first time that Armstrong has really had all of the attacks thrown at him. A little bit of respite right now before we start to get aggressive more towards the summit. This is the race leader, And this is Iban Mayo, the man who this year was a thorn in the side of Lance Armstrong at the Dauphiné Libéré. He's a brilliant climber, and he is flying up this climb right now. He's out of the saddle. It doesn't even look as if he's hurting. 6 minutes and 11 seconds down.
This is a massive crowd, Paul, and this man is just going up this hill as if the road is flat.
Nobody can stay with this guy. You look at the way he's pedaling right now. His speed is phenomenal. He really is opening up a gap over Lance Armstrong. It's 35 seconds to Armstrong. The yellow jersey of Richard Veron, I don't think will stay on his shoulders this afternoon. Yoshida Beloki digging deep right now. He's trying to get rid of Armstrong. Armstrong has responded to every attack, and I cannot keep a count of how many times he's been attacked so far.
Well, just look now as we see Beloki, and this has got to be an indication Lance Armstrong is not the man he has been these past 4 years. Riders have not been able to counter any attacks he's made, especially on the slopes of Alpe d'Huez. They are going to take a lot of confidence from this. Armstrong is sitting there, though, still on the shoulder of Beloki. For the moment, because of time lost already in the opening week of the Tour, Iban Mayo cannot get the race lead, but he is gaining time. While this rider here, Richard Veron, is losing time. He is losing the yellow jersey, and it is almost certain Lance Armstrong will be the leader tonight.
Well, it's a shame there. You see one of the riders from Euskadi has reintegrated the group of Armstrong, but still Iban Mayo is leading by 44 seconds from Lance Armstrong, and the group of the yellow jersey is at 3 minutes and 6 seconds. So virtually Armstrong is now the leader on the road as one or two riders start to recover. Roberto Heras has come back, as well as Alexander Vinokurov.
Well, that's an indication that they have slowed down, because climbing back into the race here, Alexander Vinokurov and Lance Armstrong's faithful assistant, Roberto Heras. Heras, a brilliant rider in his own right, a former winner of the Tour of Spain, and he has now come back to see if he can offer any help to Lance Armstrong at this most crucial stage of the climb. The fevered crowd here, they've been standing up here for a week waiting for the arrival of this race.
I wouldn't discount Lance Armstrong too quickly, though, Phil, because all he's doing at the moment is countering the moves of the people who he sees as being dangerous in the overall classification. He's not worried at all about Iban Mayo. He knows this man can climb superbly, but he feels he's got the better of him in the long time trials that are still to come. And he starts the day 6 minutes and 11 seconds behind the American. Armstrong looking a lot more comfortable right now. He's got his faithful teammate Roberto Heras alongside him. They're both climbing themselves high up in the overall classification tonight, while even another man starts to make a comeback. This is Mancebo.
He looks a little bit laboured, but he is slowly dragging back his quarry here on the steep slopes of Alpe d'Huez. This Alpe has been climbed 23 times. It has never seen a battle like this. Well, this is Francesco Mancebo as he comes around that corner. He's about to hook up with the cream of the Tour de France. Iban Mayo is out in front of them all. We're looking at the face of Roberto Heras. He's just come back and he's still helping Lance Armstrong. Paul?
Well, I don't believe this. The time gap has crumbled to Iban Mayo, and I can see two orange jerseys in the group, and I wonder if Armstrong, in fact, has closed down that gap on the man who attacked. There you can see Roberto Heras, followed by Armstrong. There is Yoshida Beloki. There is Hamilton. There are two orange jerseys. Maybe the other one was a return coming back from Roberto Laiseca, and it could well be that still off the front we've got the man who has launched the most vicious attack. This man who is regarded as the next future of Spanish cycling, Iban Mayo.
Iban Mayo, 25 years of age, a professional for 4 seasons now. He's had a brilliant start to the year. Ever since he turned pro, he gave a hint he could one day challenge and maybe win the Tour de France. This is an incredible scene, though, because Lance Armstrong, thanks to the fact that this man has come up, that he is now, Heras has come up, he's now joined him at the front.
Well, this is a bit further down the road. This is Michael Rogers, the Australian. His job today is to look after the team leader, the race leader as well, Richard Veron. He's setting a very sensible tell. Oh, there's a lot of problems out on the road today. The race referees are going absolutely ballistic trying to control this race, but this race is all over the slope of the Alpe d'Huez. Richard Veron is losing his yellow jersey this afternoon, but I've got to tell you one thing. He had to pay for that long breakaway of yesterday. 200 kilometers at the front of the race.
I think Lance Armstrong's rather relieved indeed that Roberto Heras has rejoined him in this chase.
Well, this man is doing an unbelievable ride here. Iban Mayo, you can see a lot of riders from Euskaltel, Euskadi are moving back into the group here. And in that group, it does appear that Roberto Laseca has made a comeback as well. It's 1 minute and 5 seconds from Iban Mayo back to the group of Lance Armstrong and all of the leaders of the Tour de France. This is an unbelievable race here as Francisco Mancebo, the leader of Ibanesto.com, tries to get in contact with Armstrong and the rest of the leaders of this race. But the man leading the race is this man in the orange jersey, Iban Mayo of Spain, by 1 minute and 5 seconds.
Well, it must be a wonderful feeling. Over the years, Paul, we've seen all the greats of world cycling carve this way through a corridor of people alone. But just behind Mayo, we've got the cream of the Tour de France.
The creme de la creme. Armstrong is there with his teammate Roberto Heras. Tyler Hamilton doing a formidable ride. Yoshiba Beloki is attacked on numerous occasions. But the great news is that there are a lot of riders coming into the group from Euskaltel Euskadi. Roberto Laseca has come back, and so has Jaimar Zubeldia.
They are building from behind. We've never seen that before either, because by now Armstrong has finished off the opposition. It must be an indication that Lance is not in the condition of the previous years. And there's no doubt now, the riders around him, as somebody is going to... That's Vinokurov, I think. Alexander Vinokurov has had a move from the front. You see, they're sensing there is a chance to beat Armstrong.
They are going at him like an automatic rifle. It's bang, bang, bang. As soon as they feel they're slowing down, somebody else goes off the front end of the main group here with all of the challenges at the Tour de France. Alexander Vinokurov had felt that the tempo was slowing down a bit. This crowd is the most monumental crowd we've seen here at the Tour de France, at least since I've been coming anyway. They're all over the place, and they're encouraging everybody in this 100th anniversary of the Tour de France. Armstrong has been attacked today more than he's ever been attacked before.
But it's so difficult to show you just how steep the slopes of Alpe d'Huez really are. But believe me, how these riders can sprint, recover and sprint again, I really don't know. Alexander Vinokurov, we've known him since his amateur days. He's now nearly 30 years of age. He's won big races, but he's never excelled at this event.
Well, he started the day 1 minute and 58 seconds behind Lance Armstrong in the overall classification. Armstrong has got to be a quick calculator and a cool calculator on the slopes of the Alpe d'Huez here this afternoon, and make sure that he knows just exactly who is where and when they're there, because right now a lot of people are throwing caution to the wind, and if they want to dethrone him, this is the only way to do it, to launch attack after attack. The first man up the road has gone a long way clear, though. Iban Mayo is 1 minute and 5 seconds ahead of Alexander Vinokurov, but Vinokurov is now leading Armstrong and Heras.
And that is Roberto Heras. He fell off as they came down towards Alpe d'Huez. He remounted, as indeed did Lance Armstrong. He was dropped on the climb and Armstrong finally put in an attack, and then he's come back again, and also back now on the back, number 81, Ivan Basso. He's only got 2 teammates left of the original 9 in this race. A wholesale withdrawal of his team today through sickness. There's only 3 left in his team, and he's on his own right here.
This reminds me right now of something that the 4 great champions, Phil, who've won the Tour de France on 5 occasions, said. The 5th one was the hardest one that they won. And right now, Armstrong is being attacked by everybody. But this man is really setting the Alpe d'Huez on fire. He leads the chasers by 1 minute and 9 seconds. The man chasing him is Alexander Vinokurov. Vinokurov started the day a long way down in the overall classification, number 21 position for him, 2 minutes behind Armstrong, but they know if they want to beat the American, they've got to hit him, and hit him hard every time it goes uphill. And let's not forget, in days gone by, it was the hills that were Armstrong's terrain.
Well, we always felt if you could beat Lance Armstrong, you could not beat him one-on-one. You had to attack him and attack him till he finally cracked. He hasn't cracked yet by any manner of means, and it's not the end of the Tour de France today. Wait 2 more weeks before we make our minds up. But he is showing us, like many cyclists who appear inhuman, he is human after all.
I think a lot of riders will sit up and take note of that this afternoon as well, Phil, as we go inside of about 3 kilometers to go there, that Armstrong is a human. In fact, that was 5 kilometers to go. It's a long way way to go to the summit for Iban Mayo, but look at the way he's tickling the pedals. His legs are moving around at about 85 to 90 revolutions every minute. The Aussie crowd is at the side of the road there thinking about their man Michael Rogers, who is still not too far behind, looking after his man Richard Veron. Second man on the road is Alexander Vinokurov. We're going to have to get the calculator out tonight to work out who is in what position in the overall classification.
Indeed, and I think Lance is doing enough right now, just enough to become the new leader of the Tour de France tonight, and that'll be a big achievement for him, and it'll be mission accomplished thus far.
Well, further down the road, we're looking now at the group of Lance Armstrong. He's got his faithful teammate alongside him, Roberto Heras. Heras has been kept in reserve a lot for the latter part of the course. This is Michael Rogers. This is what a face looks like at the Tour de France. This is when you learn what suffering is all about. He is riding the tempo for his own teammate here. This is Richard Veron, but he's learning a lot about himself today. He's learning just exactly what it's all about, to suffer on the slopes of one of the greatest mythical mountains the Tour has got to offer.
There's an attack, and it's Tyler Hamilton now, broken collarbone and all, and he can get out of the saddle. Is now trying to get clear and go off in search of Alexander Vinokurov and Iban Mayo.
Hamilton has gone. He started the day in 20th place in the overall classification, and he's seen that Armstrong is suffering. He knows Armstrong. Philly rode alongside him for many years with US Postal Service. The reaction is coming from Euskaltel Euskadi. Armstrong, I think, is not in a great day. He's allowing these attacks to come thick and fast. They're all inside of 5 kilometers to go, but it's still 10 minutes before they get to the summit. Tyler Hamilton out on the attack. The race situation at the moment is a very complicated race situation. We've got at the front of the race one man, Iban Mayo, leading Alexander Vinokurov by 1 minute and 18 seconds. About 30 seconds further back, we've got Lance Armstrong and Yoshiba Beloki and Ivan Basso. This is the biggest battle that Lance Armstrong has had on his hands, and he was put under pressure many, many times. He's only 13 seconds behind the man who attacked Vinokurov.
Well, just look at this. We've now switched to the front of the race. Iban Mayo is still ahead by about 1 minute and 18 seconds. Alexander Vinokurov of Kazakhstan is chasing him. Tyler Hamilton is trying to rid himself of the rest of this race. You can see the bandage round his shoulder, just trying to keep it in position.
Armstrong is in 4th place. He very rarely rides like this in the mountains. He normally likes to dominate. He normally likes to wipe everybody away. He's ridden a very defensive race so far in the Tour de France, and it may well be that he's not in one of his great days and he'll have to save it for the Pyrenees. But Iban Mayo is revealing to us that he is a star of the future. He has ripped up this climb right now. His legs are ticking over as if there is absolutely no effort. But Armstrong has been challenged by his men, by his rivals. Vinokurov is weaving his way through this huge tunnel of people and noise.
Iban Mayo, in his first Tour de France last year, finished a rather indistinct 88th place overall, but we know he's worth a lot more than that. This year, I think he's going to come of age. He won't take the lead today, but with 2 weeks to go, who knows? Because Armstrong is not the man of the last 4 years at the moment, and the riders will have searched that out better than any television commentator. This is now Roberto Laiseca, twice a stage winner of this race, and looking to weaken, but not chase down his teammate, who is running away to the victory just now. Go, Lance, go, says the clown on the left. Well, he's going, but not as well as he normally does.
He certainly isn't. The one thing that Armstrong did over the summit of the Col du Galibier was put the pressure on, had his team set a very hard tempo. The reason they did that was to get rid of Jan Ullrich, but they've not got rid of Yoshiba Beloki. Beloki feels today may well be the big day for him to try and put Armstrong into difficulty. They've pulled back Tyler Hamilton in 3rd position there in the red and white jersey. Hamilton has got a double fracture of the clavicule, but he's still hanging good in the front end of the Tour de France, which is absolutely remarkable. We're inside of 4 kilometers right now for Alexander Vinokurov. The race was toughened up by US Postal Service to see how the challenge were going to be to Lance Armstrong, but maybe Lance Armstrong himself is actually paying for all of the work that has been done by his team.
But look at his face. Just look at Lance's face. He still is reacting. If he is suffering, he's keeping it very much a secret. Further down the slopes, the new young Australian on the left in his first Tour de France, now told to look after the fallen race leader here in Richard Veron. Michael Rogers from Canberra on the left is beginning to look like Australia's first ever future winner of the Tour de France.
First time he's been here, Phil, just 23 years of age. He started the day in 15th place in the overall classification, and on these big mountain passes he will have learned an awful lot about his body. He'll have learned an awful lot about Mayo as well, who is leading this race at the moment by 1 minute and 30 seconds from Alexander Vinokurov. He's not going to take the overall classification at all because he started the day more than 6 minutes behind Armstrong, but he has shown us that he is an unbelievable climber. As we go to 2 kilometers from the summit, this man is going through the part where the crowd is at its wildest. They're encouraging a man from Spain, from Euskaltel-Euskadi, to get himself the victory. Mayo is the new kid on the block this year. He had hardly any wins when he went to the Tour of Pays Basqueville, and then he really opened up his account.
Yes, the race in Spain, and he cleaned up in that one. I think he won 4 stages and the overall classification. But now this is the rider going up the mountain in 2nd place, Alexander Vinokurov here, as he was hoping to be in the defence for his team leader, Santiago Botero. Botero didn't make it through the Alps yesterday. He lost 10 minutes.
Well, Hamilton has recovered there. He's got himself back onto this very elite group of 4 riders. Armstrong on the left-hand side has been attacked more than I've ever seen him be attacked in the mountains before. He's 1 minute 49. He's 2 minutes and 1 second behind the leader, Mayo, but they're actually starting to pull back to Alexander Vinokurov. In the group with Beloki and Zubeldia is Tyler Hamilton, who has to be given the title of the most courageous man at the Tour de France.
And behind, Michael Rogers rides alongside Richard Virenque, the deposed race leader, in 7th and 8th position. Here is Jan Ullrich, still struggling to limit his losses, but at 3 minutes 17, he'll have to think of a likely possible 3rd or 4th in Paris. He won't get much better than that now.
Well, he'll recover and he'll progress as the race goes on, but this is why Armstrong had his team make the ascent of the Col du Galibier difficult, because he wanted to put this man, Jan Ullrich, into difficulty. He was worried about the progression that Ullrich had made over the first week of the Tour de France and the fact that Ullrich had lost no time at all, especially on the Col de la Ramaz. We're inside of Huez now, and very shortly this man will be able to see the final kilometre. He's picking up the pace all of the time. He has shown not 1 ounce of fatigue.
Up amongst the chalets of Alpe d'Huez now. The first time we came here, 1952, when the great Italian legend Fausto Coppi won. This has been one of the most magnificent climbs today. The riders have hit each other at every opportunity. These 4 have survived, and Lance Armstrong has been frankly magnificent. If he is having a bad day, well, he's made a pretty good job of it.
A bit further down the road here, you can just see Francisco Mancebo and, of course, Roberto Laiseca. The French hero, Christophe Moreau, he's a long way back, but battling to stay in contention. He's pulling himself up to the rear end of the cars, and I think he's about to make contact with Jan Ullrich. Ullrich just around the corner there, really today trying to keep himself in contact at the front end of the Tour de France. But what a glorious sight for a man who lives to climb. Mayo sees the sign indicating he's at the final kilometre of the Alpe d'Huez.
1 kilometre, 1,000 metres, and it doesn't get much easier. There's a slight plateau, and then you climb gently up to the finish. There's a sharp left-hand turn just before the line. This has been a superb climb by this man. He's made it look so easy. He possibly knew that Armstrong, being hit by the other riders, would not counter his move, because so far he's lost just a little bit too much time, but he's gaining time now, and from tomorrow his number will be on Lance Armstrong's handlebars as a marked man.
He will be a marked man. He's always been a marked man. He lost all of his time in the team time trial. Well, his team did not really perform. They finished a long way down the overall classification, but this is a phenomenal performance. He's going to run out more than 2 minutes ahead of Lance Armstrong, and as a true professional, he's going to do up the jersey before he gets into the finishing straight. This will lose him a couple of seconds, but gain him a lot of publicity.
It's a big win for this team from the Basque-speaking area of northern Spain. This is the wonderful moment when you come alone to the summit of Alpe d'Huez. He's not the first Spanish rider to win here, but he's going to make sure everybody sees him. Time at this minute is not important when you're winning at the stage at Alpe d'Huez. It's all about the success. The 23rd time that the race has come to this mountain, and now we have this man, Mayo, making the victory. The first Spaniard was Echeverri, and that was a few years ago. So up to the line now, nearly 6 hours today in the saddle. He's going to make the most of this. It always seems a long way to the finish. The other riders, though, are going to have to sprint it out. But the Spanish will enjoy this moment, and in particularly those who come from the Basque country. They love their sport of cycling. This man now is an absolute hero back home.
An absolute hero. The man who's attacking though here further down the slopes is Alexander Vinokurov. He's inside the last kilometre as well, but I tell you one thing, he's not got very much more than about 20 seconds advantage over the group containing Armstrong, Beloki, Zubeldia and Tyler Hamilton. But it's been a glorious day for Euskaltel-Euskadi. They have done what they wanted to do at the Tour de France, shine in the mountains. One day in the future though, Phil, Iban Mayo is going to come back here to the Tour de France and think about overall victory. The group of Lance Armstrong has swelled over the last few kilometres. Mancebo has come back, so has Ivan Basso, number 81 on the right-hand side. And just getting onto the back end of the group there is the man Roberto Leisecker. What a great ride by him, and Zubeldia is there too.
Alexander Vinokurov started off with his second win in the first big race of the year from Paris down to Nice. He scored in the World Cup Classic Amstel Gold Race in Holland. That's their biggest one-day race, and now he's coming home in second place here. This is a good ride by Alexander Vinokurov. He could yet be a man for a place in Paris in 2 weeks. Looks very, very determined. Waited till they'd all attacked one another, chose his moment and went for it. He'd left it too late to catch Mayo, but look at the clock too. These are big time gaps. Mayo is moving up the overall classification tonight. Vinokurov heading up as the clock counts him down.
Well, it's a good move by Vinokurov. He's got himself an advantage over Armstrong. He's not done enough to get himself into the yellow jersey this evening because he started the day 1 minute and 58 seconds behind Lance Armstrong. And in fact, we're getting news that the yellow jersey is 8 minutes behind the leading riders. Armstrong and Yoshiba Beloki are in the finishing straight right now. Armstrong lining himself up in second place.
6 riders aren't supposed to come together on a climb like this, and Armstrong is determined now to take the 3rd place, and this is for the yellow jersey as well. He may have been beaten on the climb, but he will be the leader of the Tour de France. The American, and that's a matter of honour, I think, has taken 3rd place at about 2 minutes and 13 seconds.
And here are the hard facts of a dramatic final climb. Ivan Mayo putting 1 minute 45 between himself and Alexander Vinokurov on Alpe d'Huez, and climbing at a full 2 minutes 12 faster than Lance Armstrong and the chasing group, which included Joseba Beloki and the heroic Tyler Hamilton. Another 1:24 behind Armstrong's group was Jan Ullrich. Not a terrible day for him, but certainly not a good one. David Miller came in 22nd, 6:09 behind Mayo. Once he caught his breath, he spoke to Ned Bolton.
David, yesterday you told us you had nearly died and you saw stars in your eyes and all that sort of thing. Same again today?
Yeah, today was probably worse actually. No, I think it was really hard for everybody. Went hard from the gun, and just a long day, you know. And after yesterday as well, with the heat and the length of the stage, and those are the mountains don't get any bigger than they do today. So today was probably one of the hardest days for me. So I'm kind of, it's the first time I've gone up Alpe d'Huez, so I'm kind of happy it's done now.
Well, what is that like? I mean, it's unimaginable for those from the outside, but I mean, on the inside, what does it look like?
It's horrible. It's, I mean, it was good because there's so many people, you know, there's hundreds of thousands of people coming up Alpe d'Huez, but Christ, it's so much, it hurts so much. I mean, really horrible.
9.5 minutes behind the winner was this morning's yellow jersey. Richard Veron admitting that he knew it was pointless trying to match the pace of the front group today. But he was far from the worst off on the stage. Gilberto Simoni lost nearly 13 minutes. Santiago Botero, who's clearly now lost the leadership of the Telecom team to Alexander Vinokurov, was a colossal 42 minutes 19 seconds down. Iban Mayo, though, confirmed his status as a future Tour challenger. The future may be sooner than he thinks. He spoke to Matt Rendell.
Pero ha dejado la crema del ciclismo mundial detrás de usted.
Sí, eso sí, ¿no? Esto es un día para recordar y la verdad que para mí es un día muy grande y la verdad que estoy muy contento.
Pero Ivan, ¿ahora qué?
A disfrutar esto y lo que venga, bienvenido será.
As Ivan was led away to the tune of Que Sera Sera, Lance Armstrong was taking one of the less triumphant yellow jerseys of his Tour career. Ned spoke to him as he came off the podium.
Lance, you're wearing the yellow jersey, but that did look tough. You had to respond on several occasions.
Yeah, that was tough, that's for sure. Tougher than I expected, so I don't know. If it keeps going like that, it's going to be a long tour. But I think, you know, the first true day in the mountains is sometimes strange, and definitely didn't have it today, but I'll get better.
Now, Iban Mayo got away, but they were substantial challenges. It was enthralling to watch between Beloki there and Tyler Hamilton. Can you describe that battle from the inside?
Yeah, you know, I don't know honestly what they're racing for, because you know, letting a guy like Mayo just continue to go up the road, it endangers their chances for the classification as well. So if is the objective to ride the Tour de France, or is the objective to race against me? So in the future, you know, we need they have to be aware that you give a guy 2 or 3 minutes, it counts, and so well, we'll see the later stages.
Whether that was the sound of a rattled man, we'll see over the next few days. As things stand, though, Armstrong has an advantage of 40 seconds over Joseba Beloki, with Mayo now up into third at 1 minute 10, and Vinokurov another 7 seconds back in fourth. Francisco Mancebo is fifth. Tyler Hamilton, attacking with a broken collarbone, is a phenomenal seventh, with Jan Ullrich now 2 minutes 10 adrift. This morning's race leader, Richard Veron, is down to 18th now, with David Miller 22nd. The Giro winner, Gilberto Simoni, is now over 20 minutes in arrears, down in 47th, but the biggest bust of the race to date is Santiago Botero, over 48 minutes down and barely in the top 100 riders. By the way, after 2 days in the mountains, we are now down to 179 riders from the 198 who started. One final piece of ceremony before the day was filed in the Tour archives, a group shot of Alpe d'Huez winners up to and including today's.